Are we live? Do you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear anything from you.
Oh, no, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I had muted myself. Just need to figure out how to make YouTube go live. Start sending us your video from your stream software to go live.
It says live in StreamYard, but it's not live on YouTube.
Yeah, it looks like we just gotta make it connect somehow. Connection, excellent.
That's the same spot we were at before, right? Or oh wait, that's up and new.
Oh,
Right?
here we go. Here we go.
It says waiting for Amy Newman.
Now it's capturing it now. We are getting so close. Because I see a recording of me now. And it says I'm live. Oh!
What happened?
We're live. We're on a
Are we
different
live?
stream. We're live. Here we go. Let's send you this in chat. And hello, everyone. And welcome to setting up a stream.
Learning how to straight up StreamYard. It's been
with Amy and
interesting
James.
half hour, but I think we're getting there.
Exactly.
I guess you can go back and edit
Okay,
this part out at some point.
And I can hear you.
And then we can go. You can go back and edit it, or if you just want to keep it natural.
Either way. All right then. Then welcome to Is Christianity True? And do that one more time, actually. Now we're live screen. Okay, welcome to Is Christianity True? Amy and James versus Maddox and Smokey.
Now, this was the
Except
stream.
we're doing post
our version
commentary. Exactly.
So this was a debate that I wanted to set up with Smokey back in early October, and he felt like, I guess, he needed backup on it, so he brought in Maddox. So I said, well, we'll bring in Amy, then we'll go do this, because I know she can go toe to toe with Maddox.
And yes, thank you so very much for bringing me on board.
It was a good time.
So yeah, did you have anything else before we begin?
No, let's see some triggered Christians.
All right.
our lovable intro music that we love. People in the chat always sometimes they whine about it, like, "Oh, let's change the song."
I
No, the
know.
song is sacrosanct. Don't mess with the song. We wait all day to hear that song on debate days.
And people would complain no matter what song.
Exactly. It's a staple. It's a sacred cow. Just leave it be. Don't.
Exactly.
Uh, let's see. Well, this is the most exciting part of the debate, huh?
Woohoo! It's heart pounding.
Yeah, breathtaking.
I think his drawing looks like Maddox's drawing looks like him for the most part.
Yeah, he usually has that hat on, but yeah, that's Maddox. I guess that kind of looks like a silhouette of Smokey now that the rage has unmasked him. Which,
So,
yeah,
you
I
think
guess
that is him, like a Photoshop version?
no, I think that's just a plain
Just a
silhouette. But yeah,
I can
close enough.
I can understand like you don't want to get doxxed, but I don't know. It's hard. It's kind of hard when you want to be a debater or you want to be in public without, you know.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you don't necessarily want people calling you at work or whatever, but I
Yes,
guess
it's true.
it's part of the
Somewhere in between.
yeah. You don't want to know what I look like. It's what I look like. I'm not. It
Woohoo.
is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There we go. So I can't. I'm not hearing the debate sound.
Are you not hearing the debate? That was
I'm
one of the
not.
questions, and it was so. Is it low or do you not hear it?
I
Because I
didn't
had.
hear it. I heard it initially when the
Oh,
song
you
played,
did. That's
but
because I. It was so loud that I turned it down. Can you hear it now?
no, I don't hear anything.
Don't hear anything.
No.
Give me 1 second. I wonder if. Well, I don't. Audio. You hear us, you just don't hear the StreamYard or
I'm not hearing the debate. Yeah.
the debate. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna Google it. I'm just gonna screen for 1 second.
This dog is legitimately looking at me like I'm batshit crazy. It's like, what are you doing talking to that thing? Now he's coming over to say hi.
All right, let's try this one more time. I'm gonna go to that little graphic. Welcome everyone once again to post-debate commentary on Is Christianity True with James and Amy. Hello, James.
Spoiler, Amy. The answer is no. It's not true. That's
All right. So
you could really end it now, but let's go ahead and continue.
that's true.
Perfect.
And I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna pause it just so all of our audience knows that we may be pausing it throughout the video just to spice things up.
Hello, welcome to Modern Day Debates. Today we are talking about the topic, is belief in the Christian God reasonable? I'm really excited about this. We have 4 amazing speakers tonight. Some of them have been on here before, so really excited to host them again. We are a channel that hosts mini debates. So if you really like debating, please hit that subscribe button. Also, we have linked all of the speakers below. So if you really like what they are saying, please feel free to go and check out their content in the description box.
Please feel free to go troll their channels.
To let the speakers introduce themselves.
Exactly.
We can start off with Maddox. Maddox, what can people find in the link in the description for you?
Oh, appreciate you having us on. Should be fun. Looking forward to the conversation and the dialogue and the combat from a mental and verbal perspective. My channel is Logical, Plausible, Probable. If you get over there, I mostly focus on looking for the self-explanatory, logical, plausible, and probable reasons for our existence. And kind of my main focuses right now is kind of attacking abiogenesis and evolution, kind of decimating the high-level talking points that the average person doesn't actually go and substantiate for themselves.
Because if abiogenesis isn't true, then his hypothesis about God must be.
Yeah, that's how it works, right?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Clarissa, and thanks for hosting and being the moderator. Appreciate it. Yeah, you'll find me to be very similar to Maddox, yet quite different in the sense that I tackle it less on the scientific level and more on the theological and philosophical justifications for the existence of God. I host open mics regularly, topical discussions. Please come on by. You can come in, share your opinion, give your objections, and if you're really, really dumb, you might just get smoked.
All right, Amy.
If you make a good point that he can't refute, he'll smoke you a little bit, try and scare you off.
What would people be able to find? All right, because do you have any social media, anything that people can look you up after the stream? I think you actually might be muted.
It's a common thing.
Wait, you know what? We're gonna come back to you, Amy. James, how about you? Anything that people would be able to find at your link?
Is going on. They're both muted. James, you're muted.
I was muted too. Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay. So I'm not a YouTuber. I don't have any content uploaded as of yet, but James is nice enough once in a while to let me on to discuss important topics like this. So I appreciate the chance to speak with these 2 representatives of Christianity.
Oh, right. Sounds good.
Distinguished representatives.
How about you?
Very distinguished.
Oh, it looks like we had a slight little switch here. Can you hear us, Amy?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. What can we find at your link?
So you can find a bunch of, I would say, skeptic-based comedy. I'm working on a podcast and uploading more debates.
All right, sounds
You
good.
could see Amy call herself a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes, you can.
In comedy, that I saw first. That was the first video I saw. I'm like, she did not just call herself a Tyrannosaurus. She did.
I like that one.
When me and James are going to finish up, we're going to have about an hour of open discussion, and then that's going to lead into about 30 minutes of question and answer. So we're definitely really excited, and Maddox, Smokey, the floor is yours.
Too bad it's not a godless girl with the 4 loco.
Thank you so much. I guess I'll go ahead and
Oh,
get the ball rolling.
that was a
here.
fun debate
Well,
too.
sincerest thanks to Modern Day
Hilarious.
Debate. this exchange, and of course to our opponents and my partner, I'm actually glad to be able to accept this debate challenge from my atheist Patreon, James W., who has certainly been anticipating this debate. So thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it for lining this up, and I'm excited to do it with you. As is expected, the theists have the burden of proof for this debate, yet again, as is typically the case, but one might wonder why. The implication of the God denier is the naturalistic, unguided mechanisms are sufficient to explain the origin of life and the cosmos. It isn't a
They are.
made through the denial of the existence of a deity. While they expect so-called evidence for this deity to lack the ability to recognize the lack of evidence for what they hold to be true in pure hypocritical fashion. The acceptance of the existence of God is an inference carried partly by our recognition of the necessity of the divine mind in the emergence of our reality. The God deniers will simply deny this inference to draw one of their own that has even less evidentiary support than that which they are rejecting. Ultimately, an atheist's justification for the nature of reality is fallaciously circular. It tends to go like this: if everything wasn't
And it goes
fine-tuned
like
and
this.
uniform, we wouldn't be able to be here to have this conversation.
Yeah, after all,
The
ask
atheist
you what you think about his word salad slayer.
I know.
doesn't actually
So
explain
we finally got the
anything. It's
first
only
argument, which was
evidence for
fine
the
tuning.
justification
After
and
all
belief
that
in
word.
pure naturalistic
Uh,
properties.
burden
The
shifting,
denial of any deity at all has become a fool's errand. The world
presupposition.
nihilism and shifting goalposts of the nature or the amount of evidence required. No atheist can actually make a generally all-encompassing statement that there is not enough evidence to accept the existence of a God.
There's not
The
enough
statement
evidence
is
for the
simply
existence of a
I would
God.
just like to see one decent piece, just one.
that the insufficiency of evidence is only a statement to their own epistemological or ontological perspectives, which may or may not be functioning properly. And additionally, they may or may not even have a functional definition of what qualifies as evidence. The true absurdity of the pure naturalistic atheist position is to ignore any and all inferential evidence of the divine, and usually find some way to set a standard of evidence that is unrealistic to reality or the claim. It seems to me
Just one piece of evidence. That's it.
the burden of proof just outside the nature of the claim of what is even realistically expectable.
I don't think
Similar to
they
the
talk
demand that
about
God
Jesus at all in this
manifest
debate.
a square circle in our
Very little, and even in fact, the Christians were
atheists ultimately have
not
no
happy with it.
reason,
I saw.
to me at least,
Yeah.
to not at least be deists believing in a non-personal deity that was required for the emergence of the universe and life based upon all the fine-tuning constants and variables. But they even deny this in their attempts to set the standard unreachable by proponents of a personal deity. Atheist challenges to the falsifiability of a theistic claim are generally fallacious with some sort of mild scrutiny. Expecting something outside the nature of the claim is not operating in the honest pursuit of knowledge, but is simply an attempt at self-validating sophistry. Expecting the Christian God to violate his nature, to do something with his power that is logically impossible, is not being
It's
honest
logically
with the claim.
impossible to
And trying to
demonstrate
set an
himself.
unreachable standard
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
a very rational conclusion that
He's
God
talking about God making a rock that he
similar to
can't
the
lift or
requirement of
whatever.
theistic
You
God
can't ask him to do that.
in order to believe that the deist
See, but we don't
That's
even demand that. We're
that's
basically
a smoky talking point number 47.
is not interested in us enough to reveal himself or to care. To set that standard for belief in deism would be unrealistic. And atheists do this very similar trick with the Christian God claim as well, setting standards that aren't realistic to the nature of the claim.
Any evidence.
Nihilism
That's the standard.
stand on the actual evidence itself, simply
Any evidence.
that the presented evidence isn't enough to substantiate the claim. But again,
One piece.
personal epistemology has nothing to do with the nature of the evidence or the existence of any truth behind it. Atheists have no evidence to support their case for purely naturalistic mechanisms and tend to
That's
rely
all we've ever seen, Smokey.
on
Yeah.
qualification criteria for the claim presented. And this is no more clear when put to the Christian God claim. Some atheists do actually hold water to many
they
theist
can't
claims.
do it,
I'm sorry.
so
Some
we're off
atheist
the hook, is what
challenges
they're
do
trying
actually
to
hold
say.
water to many theist claims,
Right.
but not to the Christian God claim. And as we unpack some of the anticipated attacks to our claim, while full-blown avoidance to provide any justification of their own, we hope to show that atheism is indeed not logical, plausible, or probable.
All right, pause it, Amy. So what did you think about that word salad there from Smokethson?
I mean, it was a lot of trying to just take jabs at atheists at the beginning, and then I heard maybe two or three common apologetics.
Look at Maddox there, grinningly approving. Yeah.
I know,
Look
the
at he's
common
just
theme.
yeah. I
Philosophy
heard a lot of you can't prove naturalism, which we're not debating
not
naturalism,
the topic.
so therefore God must be real. But not the Christian God. Yeah, this was just a meaningless word salad. Just I can't prove it, but you can't prove I'm wrong. So therefore, I really like it. I really want to believe it. I'm gonna continue to do that.
This
That's what I
man
heard from
has
him.
basically already shoved off the burden of proof. I mean, sometimes I make I daringly go for the anti-theist in the strong position, but it wasn't even supposed to be that. It was, is your God true? What is the evidence for your God?
Yeah, not the if you can't tell me exactly how a biogenesis happened, therefore my theory about a Middle Eastern genie farting out animals one at a time is just as valid as modern science. You have to concede they're both valid. And no, that doesn't work.
Doesn't work that way.
Let's
Huh.
see what Mr. Maddox has to say.
Much Smoky. Maddox, go ahead with your 5-minute opening.
All right, give me just 1 second here. Smokey always taking my tagline. All right, is my audio coming through?
Oh, I used it a couple times too.
It's the theme of the night, I think.
All right, so tonight we are addressing the topic of does God exist, and is it reasonable to conclude that he does or does not? This coincides with an additional element of what we discussed, offline for tonight's debate and incorporated to the subject, and that is whether or not Christianity is also reasonable. Now, obviously, if it is not rational to conclude the former, then by default, the latter is not reasonable on its face, and the entire discussion would be an entire and complete waste of time. So let us quickly look at an overview of what I would consider just a few reasonable arguments, with emphasis on the plurality of those available rather than the singularity, and contemplate if, when looked at from the macro level, they create a powerful and rational case for the existence of God. First, we have the cosmological argument. Second, the teleological argument. Third, we must face the ontological argument. Fourth, the contingency argument. Fifth, we have the fine-tuning conundrum that my partner just referenced.
Is this not?
Sixth, there's the moral argument.
It's a good
Seventh,
definition of a gish
the
gallop.
argument of moral knowledge.
Oh, it's his opening, so
These
we'll
are
give it
just
to him.
name a few of the very substantive arguments that have been developed over the centuries, and this is all before the gigantic issues which have arisen over the last 50 years in relation to abiogenesis and the dramatic need for external intelligent agency prior to the existence of life as we know it. Now, each of these is worthy of its own debate, but ironically, in thousands of debates, hundreds of books, and who knows how many papers and individual conversations on any of these topics, in almost every case, they end with the atheist claiming, I don't know if this is 100% true. You can't prove this is 100% true.
It's called being
Therefore,
honest.
I think you are 100% wrong.
We don't know. We're continuing to look, though.
Member of a jury arguing that when determining guilt or innocence,
which they admit anyway on any other subject.
Individually, not.
I mean, you think it's more probable or logical that the truth is going to be found through modern science or a Bronze Age book written by goat herders in the Levant? Which is more logical, plausible, or probable?
If that's not enough, then to adamantly insist that nothing presented was evidence at all, because in their opinion, unless each piece of individual evidence could stand alone as 100% proof, it should be 100% removed from discussion.
What? That's what a fact is.
In this context, there's an extremely high probability the juror in question would be removed, and the vast majority of rational people would not consider their opinions to be substantive in the slightest, let alone worthy of recognition in determining a legal case. Why is it then that in relation to something which has much greater significance than jury selection, do atheists attempt to act as if the individuals arguing in favor of the existence of God are the ones who are not being rational? They are literally doing exactly what I just described, and it seems rather obvious to be nothing but a massive need for projecting their own insecurities onto opponents in order to justify their extremely fragile worldview. But let's take this one step further in relation to what is reasonable. What I'm about to address applies to both the existence of God and Christianity itself, and that is the juvenile and rebellious insistence. If they were God, they wouldn't do it this way. Therefore, God does not exist.
Oh, because we expect God to make sense, right?
Ad nauseum,
Yeah,
supposedly
I don't think
debunk
we
all
asked
facets
that
of
at
religion,
all.
while refusing to even concede that if the
Right.
entity in question is literally
Did
the
you
creator
say
of all that
something?
is, was, and ever
No,
shall
no,
be,
go ahead. I just
then guess what? It doesn't matter if you don't agree with something. That's how it is.
yeah, we got to that, Maddox.
Concept is hastily dismissed, but is exactly why I used the words juvenile and rebellious. If God both made us and ultimately set the rules, then it doesn't really matter how much you don't like them or how forcefully your denial of their existence becomes. It still doesn't change them.
Well, so I just want to make this point because I go over this often. It's that if the Christian God was real, I would want to know. I would
Wouldn't you? I would want to know.
exactly. It's if we may not we I would say we definitely wouldn't worship them. We may oppose him, but we would definitely 100% want to know. So I always feel like this is a silly point.
I mean, if I was convinced he was real, I would probably do whatever logical gymnastics I need to do to wrap my head around it, like I did when I was a Christian. I don't agree with this, but God knows a lot more than we do, so it'll make sense when I get to heaven. I'm not really going to think too much about the details. This seems wrong to me, but he knows better than I do. So, these kind of rationalizations, and most people would accept that. It's not that I find God to be immoral. I just don't think he exists, But from
Yeah,
that perspective, I can say, yeah, he is also kind of a dick, but, you know, I really don't think he's real. He's just the manifestation of ancient man.
exactly.
I view the atheist arguments like a child being angry and refusing to accept that the football game they're in has a set of rules, and no matter how much they don't like them, they still exist. And ultimately, somebody came
It's
up.
called physics.
However, when they realize the field actually has an impenetrable force field around it, they then go plop down on the 50-yard line and scream about how none of this is actually real, and more importantly, there is no reason to.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Who normally is it the atheist or the theist that when you challenge them on this, they start to go, oh, but or how do you know you're not a brain of vat? How do you know anything's real at all? And
He's trying to trigger a response right here. That this is a Maddox. He's comparing us to children, and he's trying to get a
oh
response.
yeah, I was gonna say that was ad hominem. I was gonna
You
let
guys
it
are
go,
like
but I was
you
gonna
guys are like
start.
little children because you don't believe in the rules, and you just don't like God, so you don't think he exists. You don't want to be his friend.
Though if we were to sit on here on a debate and we were like, listen, theists are wrong because they're stupid, everyone would hate us. And they would hate like if we were to do the exact same thing and be like, yeah, they're just theists because they're dumb.
If I said these guys are like kids, like 8 7 8 year old kids who see the problems inherent in the Santa Claus hypothesis for presents, and instead of letting themselves make the conclusion that maybe there's another explanation, a much more natural explanation, you just keep coming up with workarounds and all kinds of explanations to explain how Santa really does it. And this is, that's basically what's going on here. They're getting around the logical and these factual inconsistencies in their story, and they're just rationalizing it. They're just coming up with workarounds so they can maintain their delusion.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that in a debate unless I was really trying to
Yeah,
trigger.
that's what this is. And no, and see, honestly, I like asking questions during the debate. I feel like I get more out of it, and I feel like especially the people that are quote unquote skeptical of science, they never have to answer any questions. And so they just ask questions. And so I feel like I would way rather ask a really good question than land an insult. Because
Yeah, that makes sense. In a way, we're doing this to make our point, but we also want to learn something too.
exactly.
Learn about the other side. I think I made this point in the after show. The other side's not necessarily evil. They just look at things differently than we do, and You know,
Exactly.
we're all humans. We all have needs and desires and wants, and we just want to make our case. It's not nothing normally personal.
If
You know,
anything, I mean, we look at them as just normal people. Like to us, there is no separation. Like these are just people telling us they're Christians, and we gotta go like, okay. And then the Muslims come and they're like, well, we're Muslims, and we're like, okay. And the Jews and the blah, Hindus, everyone else. But we're all just trying to get them to kind of drop that little tribal group.
just come into reality.
Just come
Believe
in
in the
there, the
thing.
water's
Believe in
fine.
the things that believe in things that we can show to be true. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
Closing is if you contemplate what is being discussed tonight, what you've experienced about your own personal life, and as you progress on a daily basis towards a conclusion regarding your own existence, I strongly argue that you must analyze all of these pieces of evidence and ask yourself, is it more reasonable to conclude that a God must exist in
he's
order
got
for
through
you
two
to
parts
exist?
of it now.
From there, if you conclude that it is no tremendous leap of faith and there's not a massive leap of faith required to believe in a God, you must only then rationally consider the evidence presented and determine which God is true, not if there isn't one to choose from. And it is my position that the Christian God is the correct conclusion. But at the end of the day, for me, and from the ultimate cosmological and all the other ology considerations, the Creator does not need my defense, for his existence is obvious. And in reality, all of you should be humbled beyond expression for the capacity of understanding that has been granted to us all. For if not for the mind given to me and the one given to you.
And I have to say, they do come off very humble in this debate.
Gift
Oh, very very humble. They're
to even gain
paragons of humility.
comprehension about existence in the first place, nor even known to search for it. And that is something we must all consider. I yield.
All right, thank you so much, Amy, James, either one of you who wants to go. The floor is
Can you
yours.
guys hear me?
Yes.
Go get him, Amy.
Right.
Thank you. I get shit sometimes for the PowerPoints, but I actually got inspired from Gudsick Gibbons. She makes such awesome PowerPoints.
One time in a debate you were in, and then someone's in the chat like, "Why does Amy just put PowerPoints up and just read what's on the PowerPoint?" It's like Obama's teleprompter.
Now, do you guys see it in PowerPoint form?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to Does God Exist? More specifically, does the Christian God exist? The short answer, no. Not only is there no evidence Yahweh is real, there is evidence.
All right, everyone. Good night.
Yeah. Yeah, debate's over. He's not real.
Yep, debate's over.
Real. This goes for the characters in many of his fables, like Adam and Eve, Noah, and Moses. And especially when we get to claims of men coming back from the dead multiple days after decomposing, which is a biologically incoherent concept. However, since zombies aren't an easy concept to defend, there's a good possibility all we're going to hear about today is deism, or arguments like the first cause of the universe, even though this is also an incoherent concept which would need to be demonstrated. Theists merely assert this proposition, even though time and space began with the Big Bang.
Stop it for 1 second. I just wanted to touch on one thing here, because this came up in somebody else's stream recently. I don't recall exactly who it was, or it was in the comments section, and it was talking about it was probably standing for truth, and they had some guy on there trying to rationalize starlight, and he came up with this wild scenario where maybe the speed of light in one direction goes one speed, and then when it goes the opposite direction, it goes a completely different speed. It goes much, much faster. So they could really be that far away, and the light could still get here in 6,000 years.
But
But
why?
but yeah, why? Maybe God made it that way just so the stars look like they're far away and the universe looks old. I don't know.
You know, they always come up with these like
But but the speed of light is actually, from a physics standpoint, which I'm no physicist, but I
fixed.
do, when physicists talk and they do know their stuff, I tend to pay attention to it. And even if I don't understand it, they'll tell you the speed of light is tied in with causality. And if there's no causality, to say that there was, before the Big Bang, there's no causality. So
Oh yeah.
causality breaks apart at that level. So to say it was caused is really not a coherent even thought. It's really,
Yes, because generally speaking, if you're asking what happened after time started, well, or before time started, well, you're asking a time question. You're saying, what is this thing that we use that about being before in a in a causal space before causality?
yeah,
Well,
right.
nothing. It can't. That's not how the game works. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
that's
we don't know. But if their God can just exist outside of that, why can't the universe just do
honestly.
that?
Their god hides away. I guess it is. This is just the god of the gas, but it hides away in every mystery everywhere. I mean, my big thing, I'm obsessed with consciousness, and it annoys me. It annoys me to no end how much they use consciousness as like, ooh, it's mysterious, therefore God.
Well, we we don't know everything, but everything we've figured out so far has a natural explanation. That's why I say,
Exactly.
that's why science is so biased towards the natural, because it works. It works. Everything we found out, we have gotten nowhere by implying magic or, supernatural causes. It just doesn't work. Everything that we've gotten anywhere on has been naturally, you know.
Not, I mean, and their god should be natural. I hate the term supernatural. I think I say this in my PowerPoint. I view the term supernatural as a politically
because
correct word.
because if he just existed, then he would be himself a physical property of the
Yes.
universe.
The
He
fact that I can't shake his hand and like give him a fist pound means that we have problems. Like we have real problems.
Well, let's go on with your presentation here.
Before, quote unquote, causality. Theists might
Yes, you've
say we
mentioned that.
can't have moral values without a God, or even that we can't know anything at all without a God. This is
That's the
asking.
Mr. Batman fallacy.
I
When
know.
that
We
in the
started with that.
Bible, Yahweh is such a genocidal maniac,
I'll be right back.
Go ahead.
killing whoever he pleases and torturing his playmates if they don't love and obey him. But who gives us the right to judge such a being? Well, we're thinking agents, literally the only creatures we know of that can make judgments. This is because our biology is the foundation of ethical decisions and knowledge is a subset of beliefs. A deity does not in any way factor into the question of ethics or epistemology. Or how about the genetic code? A watch has a watchmaker, don't they? Well, sure, because we contrast what is natural with what is artificial. Meaning, in a watchmaker
Letting
world,
the kitty in and out.
everything, including the sand and water, is a watch.
No, this is a good
All
point right
evidence
here.
shows that a watch is merely a tool humans use to tell time. And that fungi, bacteria, and even humans are naturally occurring phenomena. There is currently no evidence that genes are an artificially created code that came into existence through creation and is a being monitored by another agent. Which brings us back to Christianity, which, on top of these deistic claims, would need to prove a man came back from the dead 72 hours after death.
But
And that
Amy, he's God. He can do whatever he wants, right?
appeared
Exactly.
with no one able to see him
You
again.
can just poof it.
Meaning that Jesus seems to have died and stayed dead.
Well,
Your
pause it
claim.
right here. I wanted to add something. The claim is that
Yeah.
that Jesus he died on the cross and then he descended into hell. Now we know from the Bible that hell is where God is not. So Jesus, who is God, descends into the place where God is not, thus making it no longer hell, but it remained hell. You see, it was hell, but it wasn't, but it was, but it wasn't, but it was. There you go.
It all makes sense now.
There you go.
And, and
It's
I,
hell, even though God is there. Jesus is God. He's in hell. Hell's where God's not. But it's still sort of hell. But I don't know.
so he's
Turn
just so
turn
he's
the page.
chilling there. Yeah, why didn't he kill Satan? I never understand why God doesn't go down there. It's like his
Uh,
basement, but he never goes in the basement.
apparently, he just enjoys watching people suffer down there. Ha
I
ha ha!
know.
You didn't believe I exist. Now I'm real, bitch.
It is
You
kind of the
you
conclusion you have to draw, right?
you've been burning for 400 quadrillion years down there. Get ready for another 400 more, and then you're just getting started, bitch. I mean, I guess
Exactly.
that's what he does for kicks on a Saturday night. I guess I don't know.
And I try and ask people who believe in hell, like I try and get them to wrap their head around forever. Like I understand, okay, because there's some things that, okay, the pedophiles and all the really terrible people, but okay, how about like the guy who just didn't believe? You're gonna just torture them forever and ever?
I mean,
You're gonna torture anyone
I,
forever,
I mean,
ever and ever?
maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just overly compassionate, but I think if you took the worst person in the world and you doused him in gasoline and lit him on fire, after about 30 seconds, I would just take a gun and I would put them out of their
Oh,
misery
exactly.
because
There's no crime.
even if it was Adolf Hitler, or somebody who's done, or Joseph Stalin, or someone who's done terrible things, I wouldn't get anything out of just watching them suffer. It would benefit nobody.
And it would not change. Exactly. It would
It's not
change
going to
no
undo
one's
anything
mind.
they did.
It would not undo anything. It is wanton torture.
I mean, I don't know if did you ever see the movie Elizabeth from 1997, I think it was.
I haven't.
Quickly, there's an opening scene. It's from Queen Mary in England when she restored the Catholic Church, and it's a scene where they're burning. The restored Catholic Church is burning 3 Protestants out there for rejecting Catholicism, and um, it just goes. It shows the brutality of a death like that, and even the people watching. After about 20 or 30, when the people start coughing from the smoke and they start feeling the flames, and the people watching them start throwing sticks onto the fire so it will burn faster to put them out of their misery, so that they won't suffer longer than they need to. And that's just most people who are not sadists, we don't like to see other people suffer just for the hell of it. It doesn't benefit anybody. Even
Exactly.
if they do things that are really, really bad, just wanton suffering is just.
That's also why I'm a little bit against the death penalty, but
I'm
that's
not.
another time.
I'm not against it, but I definitely wouldn't want it to be carried out in overly torturous or overly painful
Yes.
ways. We That's not part of it. Uh, but we could discuss that
Yeah.
another
Exactly.
day.
Category of cheap parlor tricks. Did Jesus turn water into wine? Did he walk on water? Because if so, he should be frontlining in Vegas.
I never
Literally, none of these illusions are evidence of a deity. Someone could come back from the dead and not be
I don't think
stuck.
they defend any of his actual miracles. They never defend the miracle claims or any of that stuff,
Well,
unless it's the topic of the debate.
the funny thing is about those miracles is and how these gospels are not myth is these dumb as a box of rocks disciples. Jesus constantly is going around doing these miracles, and like they're still amazed and surprised, like when he feeds the crowd, and then he does something very similar a few pages later on, and they're surprised again. Like, no, he can copy and paste bread and fish in a basket and feed people. You've seen him do this before. He has magical powers and shit.
Yeah, and yet they keep on being surprised. They're
Oh,
always
oh,
surprised after the same, just like in Moses.
like after he raises himself from the dead, and then they're all surprised to see him. Like, he can raise people from. You've seen him supposedly raise people from the dead before. So why is that such a revelation? This is literature. It's not actual history.
We just get them to admit that.
Son of a god. Someone could be born of a virgin mother and not be the son of a god.
This, I want to be honest, that was a point that I got from Hitchens. I was watching Hitchens debates the night before, and he made a really relevant point, which was there's really nothing tying a virgin birth to like a deity. Like that's it's mythic structure, but
I
there's
mean, yeah. It's an unbelievable claim. It's an incredibly unlikely claim, but I don't know. I mean, there are animals who are able to reproduce without having sex,
Exactly.
parthenogenic, I believe, and they're not deities. They just have evolved the ability to reproduce themselves without having sex. It's it doesn't mean they're godlike in any way.
And speaking and going in the opposite direction, and I ask this to Christians constantly, and going back to torture and hell for a second, ISIS crucifies children upside down. And I ask them, don't they suffer a little bit more than what Jesus had to? Because they probably lived longer. And
when they died, they didn't know that they were going to come back from the dead anyway, like Jesus did.
Exactly. And they didn't get to reign in heaven forever.
I mean, someone posted this in a stream one time, and it makes sense. Like, having a really shitty weekend where you get killed and then come back 3 days later to rule for the rest of eternity is not really much of a sacrifice,
Oh, no, it is not.
Like, yeah, you got the crap beat out of him and he died, but 3 days later he was as good as new,
Exactly.
I mean,
better than good as new.
He was as good as possibly could ever be. Now, I do want to point out here before Smokey goes nuts and say he doesn't believe in the traditional doctrine of hell. He takes an annihilationist approach which is where you'll be burned. No, you'll be annihilated. You'll burn for a time commensurate with how evil you were, but after a certain point, God will notice that you've suffered enough and allow the flames to then consume you, and you will disappear from existence. I believe that's how he would describe it, even though he would say that's a straw man. He loves to, when you tell him what he believes, he loves to say it's a straw man, but that's one of his go-to lines. But that's me trying to
see, but it's so funny. It really is, like, because I don't think that's biblical, but I'm sure he'll quote passages that he says that he gets it from, but it sounds more like
vaguely.
It sounds more like his brain trying to like
make God better,
Yeah, like, okay,
more merciful.
Because he's like, oh gosh, well, I mean, it can't be like they're all burning forever and ever and ever. It has to be like maybe they have like a timer for how bad they were, and then it just it tortures them for that long. It's like a torture oven.
Yeah,
it lets them out at a certain time.
After a certain, it's making his God more humane, and the thing is, Smokey is very vehement on defending the Trinity, which isn't clearly spelled out. You have to cobble several verses together and use a lot of complicated theology to get there, and they do it because they've had lots of time to do it, and they have to believe it anyway. But something like hell, which is pretty clearly, explicitly laid out that this is eternal, this is forever, but that sounds really, really bad, and it makes God sound really, really mean, because not even serial killers and mass murderers would do anything that bad, and God has to be better than they are.
Oh, I know. They hate the genocidal maniac line, but he kind of goes around killing people. He kind of goes around fucking up and killing people. That's like his thing.
That's what he does. I guess he's bored, after existing forever. He's done everything that there would be to do trillions of times in every possible way. After a while, you have to think a being like that would just get so bored he would will himself out of existence. Like I just wish I wasn't here anymore, and then he would just poof be gone.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's finish up your presentation here. You're
Only
putting a
fit.
lot of jabs into them.
Finally, we should be
I
going.
will say I'm just gonna pause 1 second. I like making this too because I feel like it anchors like the conversation, like because then this is what we're gonna talk about. Hopefully, it doesn't always work out that way because they
Well, when you're in
never.
the moment, in a debate like this, like me, I'm constantly trying to write notes down for when I hear something, and then I want to make sure I hit this. But then by the time you get back to it, the conversation's moved on, and you don't really want
Yeah,
to go back. And you know, eh, but having time to think about it and chew on it, you can maybe put things together a little bit better.
yeah, exactly.
Said there's no good evidence for a God or Christianity. The notion of having a human sacrificed to forgive humanity's sins is downright evil, and this would be an evil God. There is literally no rhyme or reason as to why Jesus would have to die. Adam and Eve was not a literal story, thus, there wasn't a reason for this rabbi's murder to take place. We're thus stuck with the conclusion that Jesus, if he existed, died merely because he
Yeah,
pissed the Romans off and nothing more.
Smokey, he doesn't believe in the literal Adam and Eve, or he has a nuanced view of it.
65.
Of Adam and Eve.
Who we have
Yeah,
for us to believe anything else
more
I
so the
mean,
serpent.
now
It's
sound
He
it's
doesn't believe in a literal snake. He thinks it's the word means like an angelic being is what I would say he would say, some type of being that they weren't familiar with. So maybe the devil came down and under the guise of an angel, and then not a literal snake, even though that's what God inspired them to write, was that it was a serpent. But
see. In some ways, I want them to be like my rule of thumb is I want to get them over the what I call the DS line. Like once they start arguing over whether you're an agnostic or an atheist, I stop caring. I'm like,
yeah, I don't get into that.
we did our job. All I want to do is get people to stop. And so, like the more wishy-washy and more liberal and contextual theists they are, the better they are in society, in my view. And so, I want that to happen. And it's
That's
better for
true.
Western society. And yet, they become harder to debate and to debunk their claims because they get more
'Cause
wishy-washy and
they've um they've gone around some of the harder things to wrap their heads around. They've evolved their religion
yeah.
to make it more impermeable to attack. They've retreated on certain areas where they think they can, and they're only really defending a few key points instead of defending like the whole story.
I can imagine some of them have actually wrestled with subjects. And so you go and they go like, holy shit, this is really bad. And so they sit and they think about it and they think and they think and maybe they look up maybe I'll do them as strong man. Maybe they think and they look up research. And then they kind of like tie a knot around what they think is like the annihilation theory, and then they walk away and then they go, okay, I solved that.
Well, see, the
That
thing
at
is, the
least
the
makes it
Bible
in my
is
brain okay.
the Bible is so big and it has so many contradictions that you can find verses that support pretty much anything. You
Yes.
just have to tie them together and try to
It,
show why those are meaningful, not the other ones.
exactly. And you can build you can build opposing views and you could make almost two different cases from the same book
So
and have them debate each other.
yeah, I mean, they've been doing it for 2,000 years, and you can scarcely find two Christians who agree with each other about literally almost anything, and they all read the same book. And
Same book.
this is what I've said before about this position. It's like, so if you read the Bible and you come across anything that is testable, and you test that claim and it fails, well, then that claim was not literal, it was metaphoric or figurative,
Yeah.
and or that claim was God talking to
Put it
ancient
in the
man.
other box.
God was talking to ancient man in a language they could understand, so you can't hold that against him. That doesn't apply. But when it makes untestable claims that you can't verify one way or the other, you just have to believe it. Well, then, okay, that claim is actual literal truth, and you have to believe it, or God's going to be very mad at you. So when it's testable, it doesn't have to pass the test. It can be allegory or uh, metaphor. But if it can't be tested, then you have to believe it.
But that's a heads I win, tails you lose scenario.
Well,
They put it in. It's going in one box and the other, and the second that you can show that this box is wrong, it's going in the other box.
exactly, and they've had 2,000 plus years to mull over these questions and come up with these arguments. And
Well, they have. I mean, it's the entire thing. They basically have created a field, apologetics, that is just there to defend the faith. So they have these people like Aquinas and others who,
all the saints, yeah.
yeah, who his they pull from him all these arguments that they use over and over. We're gonna hear kalam, which I think it's funny. I think sometimes when they want to sound sophisticated, a Christian will use a Muslim argument and a Muslim will use a Christian argument, and vice versa, vice versa.
Right.
It's just so funny how much because I think either Aquinas was reusing it, or someone from or someone in the Muslim Golden Age was repackaging Aquinas's into Kalam, and so but we're still dealing with the same nonsense thousands of years later.
See, I was going to say something I was trolling Otangelo with the other day in chat in a live stream, but it's not coming to me. So
That's
when
okay.
it comes back to me, I'll go back to that. But you can
I'm
go ahead.
gonna press back, and I'll be right back again.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, James. If you want to go ahead with your opening statement.
Okay. Is my audio working?
Yes, it is. Hold on, your audio just went out again. And for the chat, we're going to try to get.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and we're going to get you back on the
I'm sorry.
screen. Go ahead.
All right. Again, I want to thank the distinguished speakers for agreeing to this debate, Maddox and Smokey, and thank Amy for agreeing to help me in this endeavor. And the real challenge for me and Amy in trying to prep for this debate is that when you start looking at Christianity, there are literally so many problems with it that we could be here for days and still not address each and every possible problem that makes Christianity not logical. It's certainly not plausible, and it most definitely isn't probable.
He's
Now,
not
I also
smiling
feel
that
bad
time.
for Smokey and Maddox because the walls are closing in on their worldview. Uh, God is under attack from every single side, from every single field of science, has chased God out of almost everything we used to attribute God to. In fact, Yahweh basically now only has two safe houses, the origin of the universe and the beginning of life. We pretty much understand how almost everything else works, except for these two events that have only happened once in the course of recorded history. Not recorded history once ever. So it's a little hard for research it, but we are working on those problems. And when you look at the track record that we have so far, every single time humans have investigated a claim, or a hypothesis to find out why or how something works. We have 100% track record of everything being naturalistic. That's why science has that bias toward naturalism, because it's always worked every single time before, 100% of the time. You've never had to invoke magic or a god or a deity. Everything works through natural processes. That and they're going to disagree with all that. They're going to say that, well, God's somewhere behind the scenes making it all happen, and that's the basis of Christianity. You can't prove a biogenesis happened, therefore, it's just as plausible for me to assume that pixies farting out animals one by one is a logical explanation for the universe and or for the diversity of life, and it's just not. Um, and the first thing that makes Christianity unreasonable is that what it's built on, Judaism, is also not true. And it's built on that faulty foundation. Now, let me see if I can do screen share here. I have a few quick slides I wanted to illustrate. Let's see. This slideshow was apparently very triggering for Smokey. Is it on?
Yes, it is.
So, in the historical record, Israelite culture, there's no firm evidence of them existing before about 950, 850 BC. So, all these stories that happened before then are most likely myth, they're made up. And at this time period, we have two people who start writing books and writings that have become uh, the Jewish Torah. And historians know they don't know the identity of these authors, but they know who wrote it based on writing styles, and they can track the different authors. And what we find out is that the Old Testament is a heavily edited hobbling of writings that have been modified and revised several times to scrub out the truth. And that truth is that Judaism began as a polytheistic religion, and you will find all throughout the Old Testament, you'll
I
find
don't like that
litterings
fact.
of polytheism.
No,
they
they
don't. They didn't question the existence of other gods. So we have here in 750. No, they don't like that one bit. Uh, Writing books as the Assyrians were making preparations to invade Israel. I think that's Hosea, Amos, and Ezekiel. Could be wrong on that, but I think that's who they are. And then we have in Judah, King Josiah, 622 BC. Him and these prophets, they were strict Yahwists. They did not want to promote the worship of any other deity aside from Yahweh. It's not that they didn't believe other deities existed; they just wanted to devote primary attention to Yahweh. And when Yahweh, according to the story, when he first identifies himself to Abraham, he's at that time he's doing business as El Shaddai. Now, the Canaanites, who were one region over, they had a god with a similar name to that. It's called El Shaddai. So why is Yahweh, the God of the Bible, doing business as a Canaanite god? You almost might think that they're one and the same. You might think that. And then when Yahweh goes to meet Moses, he has to tell him, I'm the El Shaddai who talked to Abraham, as opposed to any other gods who might be sending telepathic messages to Moses. So King Josiah, 622, he promoted strict worship of Yahweh. And his high priest stumbled upon what he claimed was a old book of the law called Deuteronomy that had, I guess, got lost in time. And but even in Deuteronomy, even the strict Yahwists, you see polytheism. And so this he went through and he added chapters and he modified all these other books to give it a Yahweh slant, to disparage the worship of other gods. But yet, even in Deuteronomy, you see, you shall have no other gods before me. It's not claiming that there's no other gods in existence. He's just saying they suck. I'm better than them. You better not worship them or I'll kill you, basically. So it was monolaterist polytheism. They didn't deny other gods existed. You see frequently in the stories, basically, anytime the Israelis were left alone for more than 5 minutes, the first thing they did was start worshiping other gods. And this is even after witnessing miracles and Yahweh suspending the laws of physics on their behalf. And yet Moses takes a little long on the mountain.
Short-term
they're
memories.
melting gold and building a calf. I don't think these stories really stack up to reality. I don't think people are this dumb. We don't people are not that stupid. Anything like this today. Now, unfortunately, for King Josiah, Judah eventually was conquered by Babylon in 604 BC. And here we say in the Psalms, how can we sing the songs of Yahweh while in a foreign land? Well, what do you mean? He's the God of everywhere. You can sing to him anywhere. Why does that make a difference? It's because gods back then had regions that they were associated with. They were not in Yahweh's area anymore. So it was an unusual experience for them. So at this point, we have a guy come up called Second Isaiah who started putting out writings. He acted like he was the first Isaiah, but the scholars can clearly tell he wasn't. The writing style is different, all sorts of things that the historical scholars use to determine the authorship and the legitimacy of a text. And here in Isaiah, for the first time, we see, I am the first, I'm the last, besides me there is no God. That's a stark contrast from what we've seen before, where even when Moses goes to Pharaoh and he does his parlor tricks, the Bible says that the Egyptians, their gods were able to manifest magic. Their gods were able to do things. Yahweh's just saying, hey, my magic is a little bit better than theirs. Come worship me. And then either Second Isaiah or he could be the priestly source. Not scholars aren't too sure about it, but either way, the priestly source then went back and added again to these books and revised them to make it look more monotheist. And then, by the way, he wrote the book of Leviticus. And then they went back and added to Genesis 1 a creation myth that wasn't.
So I'm saying it looks like he's dabbing.
And that was in about 600 BC. That's when basically monotheism got established in Judaism. Now, what some astute people like Smokey or Maddox might say is all those references, or some of those references to polytheism in the Torah, they're going to say, aha, that's a reference to the Trinity. Well, not really, because those references stop at a certain point. Only in the older text do you see these references to we or us. That eventually gets cleaned up later in the gospel. So it's more probable they're not talking about the Trinity. They were talking about, originally they believed in more than one gods. And you can talk about the New Testament, but if the foundation it's built upon is a faulty foundation, then you don't even really have to go further. They're telling us that their God is incapable of telling a lie. So if someone's incapable of telling a lie, how many lies do you have to catch them in to disprove them? Well, only one. They only have to tell one lie, and then you don't have to believe that they're incapable of lying anymore. And it doesn't just like us, but it just proves that this is another man-made religion, just like all the others. There's nothing really special about it. Maddox and they both happen to live in a country where Christianity has been the dominant religion for a long time. So that happened to be the one that they latched hold to. But is it logical or plausible? Maybe probable if they were to be in Saudi Arabia or Iran, that they'd probably be devout Muslims, and all their arguments would probably also apply to that too. I think that makes sense. So, thank you.
All right.
So what do you think about that, Amy? How did I do?
I think you did pretty good. I think it's funny. I don't think they really like dealing with the Old Testament roots. You know, how it was oral tradition, how things changed, how it was just a very different world back then.
And that's why I that's why I when the day before the debate, I was trolling Smokey and just friendly in one of his streams about the debate, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm anticipating just a bunch of standard atheist talking points and boilerplate atheist rhetoric." So I wanted to give him something that was a little more than that, something aside from what he's used to having thrown at him before. So that's why I went with the because I was originally coming up with a presentation that was more about pointing just to the absurdities in Scripture, which he's probably dealt with some of those before. So I kind of switched and went to, well, you can believe it, but you could get around the absurdities, but the texts are not, they're not what they claim to be. They're not. It's not a coherent story. It's a heavily edited, modified story. Yeah, it's not what it claims to be as a literal history.
Yeah, and it seems to have just completely shifted as it, yeah, became Christianity.
It evolved. Everything does, right?
Indeed.
No question. Definitely shoot it into the super chat, and we will um, guarantee an answer to that question. And without further ado, let's get into the open discussion.
See, Maddox he's gonna want to jump right on this. He's ready to go.
Well,
He said his tagline a few times.
so I think between Amy and
I'm gonna have my ad hominem count though going.
both myself and Smokey should be proof of the Christian God, since we were both very prophetic about what we were
Yeah, no, not really, Maddox.
in their opening statements. I mean, I use the word ad nauseum for the talking points for a specific reason. I mean, the level of
Yeah, we're pointing out inconsistencies and
well,
absurdities in
I mean,
your
do you
faith.
agree with that, Smokey, of them literally embodying what we were talking
Pretty
about?
much, with the exception of James.
How long they're going into how triggered they are though.
Asinine, mentally back.
They're not. They haven't made an argument to us.
They're not making a point.
By some
They're
really
just pontificating.
assumptions about the text based upon literary stylings, which are nothing more than pontifications and
So-
conjecture. So I mean,
So-
really,
so
that was
again,
such a desperate
yes.
grab. It really blew my mind, James, that you would go to that level. Like, I
No,
know,
it didn't, Smokey.
you know, all those things you pulled up have no actual evidence to them. This is something dreamt up in the last, 30, 40 years by a bunch of hyper liberal scholars. By the way, did you ever go to
Yeah.
anything that wasn't a liberal
Buzzword.
scholar to get any of this like actual information, or did you just go, well, let me
Someone's
find
triggered.
that seems to doubt the
Very
scripture and
triggered.
pack it all into my opening? Was this kind of just where it went with you?
Absolutely, Smokey. Yeah. The mainstream scholarship, Smokey. This is
No,
what
it isn't.
No, it is, Smokey. What you guys are saying, Smokey, you're discounting it, but you are also the one who is saying
See,
all
the issue
of
is, James.
let me make my point, Smokey, and then I'll come back to you. You're the one who's saying the entire field of biology is bullshit. They don't
Nope.
know what they're talking
Don't
about.
say that.
They're
That's a
dumb.
straw man.
Yeah, he Creation does. is true.
Oh,
He doesn't. He rejects evolution. Say geology. That's not
Oh, really?
true.
No, I
Smokey
don't say
rejects
that either.
evolution?
Tends to disprove a global flood. You
Nope,
also
I don't say that either, and I
linguistics
don't
are
believe
not
in a
true
global
because
flood.
you're
Are you really
saying-
going to just straw man me the whole time, dude? You don't even know
Yeah.
what I believe.
Can I
But
be-
Maddox does. Maddox believes in a global flood. Maddox believes in a young Earth.
Hang on.
Go
So
ahead.
James, so you're in. This is where the hypocrisy is very self-evident and rather ironic, because one, you are a Patreon on Smokey's channel. I've witnessed you guys interact. You're in there all the time, and I know beyond doubt that what you just accused Smokey of are positions that he doesn't hold.
At all.
So
He does.
Or you just like you
I
not pay-
know
you-
he's.
They're
I-
still
I-
bitching.
No. So do you not pay
They're
attention?
just
to why
whining.
you're attempting to be a straw man and a direct liar?
And about those zombies.
Smokey actually affirms the. He's an old earther, but he does not subscribe to the theory of evolution. So when I say discounts the entire field of biology,
What are you talking
he
about?
discounts the
I've
entire
said it
field of
multiple
biology.
times, James, that I actually
You
do.
said
With the exception that I don't accept the caveat of the pure hypothesis religious nonsense of assuming everything is naturalistic when those components of naturalism hasn't been proven. That's your faith requirement. I'm not going to accept it just because you tell me I have to.
He doesn't believe in
I
evolution.
know. I just
I'll
wanted
get
to be
back to you.
So
prophetic.
neither of
Just-
them do?
James, did you
No.
get any evidence for Christianity in their opening?
Well, no, there is no
Exactly,
evidence.
so
All
I
they
don't
can
know
do
what
is
you guys
point
are
to.
talking about.
What are
You
you
don't know
talking
this.
about?
You don't
He
know that.
Hey, Amy, you like to avoid like all of Maddox's opening? Were you just not paying attention? He literally lined
I
out
heard
all
it. I just didn't hear evidence. For
arguments.
See,
Christianity.
Maddox is just sitting back. He's just letting Smokey go.
all
He's
these
just kind of.
The problem is, name one. See, this is the problem, Amy. Maybe you're just mentally defunct.
We're at 6.
Turns me
I
on
think
when you
that's
insult me. Keep doing it.
Mentally defunct, Amy.
Maybe you don't know what
No,
evidence
I feel it.
So this
I do.
this is
Down the valley.
exactly why I was hesitant to engage in a yet another debate with you, Amy, is because as in every single previous debate, you literally don't listen to a word that is said, a concept that is presented. You deny that they ever happened. If you've ever been
Can I ask? We're still nothing, right? They're still at the it's intro insulting stage, right? Like that hasn't left.
They're still just whining and complaining
still just
about the
whining.
arguments. They haven't presented any type of defense to why their God is reasonable.
contradicted or have evidence presented
That's
against
flat
you.
wrong. So I don't know why you're saying
Did
this.
you?
So
Okay, so going back
you
to our
agree
first one,
fine-tuning is not evidence for
going back
Christianity,
to your first one of our first interactions. Did you ever go and research code mapping?
Codon. A codon is
Did you ever go and research code
nucleotides.
mapping and
This is the
information theory?
first
Yes or no?
rabbit
First of all, it
hole.
was codon. It was
No,
codon.
no. Did you go? Did you go
I
research?
reject your premise.
Do you know what code mapping is?
What is code mapping?
We knew he was going to do this.
You're learning to be a
Yeah,
dev still, right? And you don't know what code mapping is, and you again are still going to claim it. But then you brought up in your opening statement, it doesn't apply to genetics in your opening statement
Doesn't
as
apply
a
to
denial.
genetics.
But you still
Not
didn't
evidence
go.
for
You
Christianity.
still didn't
not
go
even on
and
topic.
no. That's the foundational piece in context of God being required for existence, which I'm pretty sure in my very opening paragraph I talked about that being a fundamental to whether or not Christianity is a reasonable conclusion.
Okay, but you didn't give evidence for
So
Christianity.
so if God exists, then there's got to be a God. So I'm just going to throw my God out there, right?
Yeah, Amy, by the way, maybe your standards of expectation for evidence for the resurrection isn't realistic. Maybe you expecting a standard of evidence for an ancient people that isn't even within the realm of reality is just a you problem, not a problem of the existence of the actual event. Maybe you just have a really ass backwards idea of what qualifies as evidence for an ancient historical biological.
Okay, give it to me. 72 hours of decomposition and then resurrection. What's the
That's a
evidence?
natural.
He's God, Amy.
Oh, that's
He can
right.
do
He
whatever
can
he
be magic.
wants.
To naturalistic mechanisms again is a you problem. So unless you want to sit here and prove naturalism is true, which is basic, you can't use it to judge the event. That's your own fallacy. You don't get to presuppose your worldview onto us and say, well, since it doesn't fit in my worldview, it can't be true. That's a you problem.
Is it just your feelings that you feel Christianity is
No.
Any evidence?
Yes, Amy, but apparently you're not able to. Yeah, I literally named it several times. I think you just can't recognize anything that people.
What evidence?
I think you're just in pure
abiogenesis, not evidence for Christianity. Let's see.
Wait,
fine-tuning, not evidence
Maddox,
for Christianity.
Have
to keep on going down?
Go at it.
Okay.
Oh, he must not have had anything to say, so he just took that rabbit hole.
So I'm assuming you actually haven't gone.
See, here's the thing. I shouldn't have even taken it as notes because I took it as notes and I said it, and what they did with that is because I took notes that they said it once. They're like, "Oh, okay."
So he's saying I made arguments, and you're looking back. Well, what arguments did you make, Smokey? Fine tuning how does that? Where is that evidence of Christianity? That's evidence maybe for deism, but it's not even really good evidence for that because the arguments are not even all that solid, Smokey.
Yeah, and none of them, just like you were saying, none of them point towards any specific God. They're all the type of deistic claims that you get from a wishy-washy, I can't prove it.
And this is what I told Otangelo the other day because he was going on a biogenesis and speed of sounds channel. Otangelo's like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. And it's the same thing I said here. So what Otangelo is saying, what Smokey and Maddox are saying is, if you can't tell me exactly how a biogenesis happened, then you have to you have to put my theory of a genie farting out animals. That's equal with modern science. You have to consider that to be
And
the same.
and see, funny, they said, I think they both gave that answer or similar down the line, is that's what they would accept as proof of a god not existing. And while that's fine and I'll accept that answer, and I can't know this for a fact, but something tells me, I don't know, say them, but just say many theists, once abiogenesis gets proven, it's just another can. They'll just
You
say, okay, we'll
you can't prove God
prove
didn't do it.
this. Yeah, or
God
you
didn't
can't
do it.
prove God didn't do it or something. It will just be adjusted, and yeah.
Well, Maddox said that, but Smokey actually got pissed off and left the stream by that. He never actually was there to give an answer for that. But yeah, he was hard. He didn't spend very long in the after show. He went to have himself a nice soy burrito and went to bed, but he was a little triggered, but it's okay. He's not a bad guy.
It happens. Yeah, hey, I like both of them. I just
It's not personal.
it's not personal.
I would like nothing more than to lead them to atheism, and we can go out and have a good time. I can show them how to live life where you don't have to worry about a celestial North Korea peering at everything that you're doing. You don't
And
have
that's
to
the
go around.
crazy thing. I try and use that number because I feel like its premise is very sticking, but you're telling me someone's watching you, all of us, 365, 24/7? Like,
And he's
that
very
doesn't sound
concerned what you do with your genitals. Very
about
concerned.
who we are.
Very
That's
concerned.
exactly. And yeah, I don't know. I'm glad there's no evidence for that.
And looked at any of the paradoxes and the conundrums facing abiogenesis, which, per the admission this year of atheist abiogenesis researchers, they're actually getting further away from having an answer rather than closer to, in spite of your perpetual
They're not.
and projection that somehow that's being answered. I'm assuming you didn't go and research it at all. Is that right?
So that's not true. The premise is unfounded.
Also, this is a common thing that I do with Maddox. Like, I like him, and I can have honest debates with him, but each debate, every time he throws a buzzword out, I look the buzzword up. I'm like, okay, I come back, I say what he is, and he brings up something new, and he's like, how about this word? And it's like, and almost none of them, you look up Turing complete, and it never backs creationism. It is always a paper on, hey, this looks like a cell can do this. Doesn't really work like a computer, but kind of works like this. And they only quote, they'll take from a paper and they'll say human computer, and that one line they will home in on.
And Maddox, he's not a dumb guy, and I would never say that. He just
It's
really
almost like
wants
you have to be
believe.
smart to do this. It's very weird in that, yes, you have to say
But I'm not going to pretend I understand all the intricate mechanics of biology and evolution. But I trust that the PhDs and those people that know way more about it than me, that they're probably right when they come to the conclusion, 99.7% of them, that evolution is beyond question. It's just a fact. You can't deny it. And the 0.03% of them who disagree with that, I'm going to probably just those people and say that they don't know what they're talking about.
it also breaks my
regardless.
heart that both of them don't believe in evolution. I thought Smokey was gonna be like, I am the science more Christian. Like, I understood. I thought Maddox was more creation-y, but the fact that they're both creation-y.
Because he backed off that now. He almost said that, because he said he doesn't deny biology, but then he is not a theistic evolutionist. I don't know exactly where he's going with that. I'd have to ask him about that at a later date. But yeah.
But yeah.
And you're still not presenting evidence for
Have they
Christianity.
solved
Are you a
the-
deist?
Have they
You just
solved
want to
the
become a deist? Just
have
admit.
you have they solved the annealing problem?
What's the annealing problem? So,
This is where they just throw something out there
It
that
is.
you
It's everything.
that you don't know, and then the it becomes, oh, you don't know this one particular word, you don't know anything about the subject. I know that word, so therefore I know more than you.
Exactly. Well, the worst part is every time I look up the word, I ask them the word, and then it always just leads to more like, okay, you got that. Now let's go over something else. It never goes to, and this is evidence for a god. We
I mean,
never get to
yeah.
a god. They always want to talk about genetics or abiogenesis or
Poke
the
a few
Big
holes in,
Bang.
take a complicated theory and try to poke a few holes in one or two of the little pieces and imply that the whole thing doesn't work because we don't know exactly how this piece works or how that piece worked. The whole theory is sound, but the intricate details, still need to be worked out.
Or if I had a nickel for every time they talked about the second law of thermodynamics, if they talked about entropy, I would not have college loans. Like
And
they talk
it's
about it like it's an end all.
and the doctors and the physicists who really understand it, that it's no threat to modern science at all.
Because they ignore the sun. We're not a closed system.
We're not a closed system.
They're like, yes, it's everything would go chaotic. I mean, entropy is important. I'm not poo-pooing it. It's just funny that they like take up topics that I think they feel sound sciency, and that a lot of lay people don't understand.
It goes over the heads of people, and people who really don't know think it's that he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, right?
Exactly. So it's like, oh my God. Well, I guess the second law of so people in the pew are like, oh my God, the second law of thermodynamics. We must be in the sky floating, and there's no reason that we have energy except for God. And then someone turns around, they're like, but what's that big ball? The big ball in the sky.
God made that.
Okay. And exactly. But then the entropy, then that point just dissipates. That entropy point just dissipates away.
It's like, to compare it would be like taking a legal dictionary and then going to a courtroom and just spouting off random words out of the dictionary before a judge. And to somebody who didn't know the law, who had no idea what you're talking about, it might sound like this person knows what they're saying, but the judge would be looking at you like, that doesn't even make any sense.
Like,
what the
why
hell
are you reading
talking
the
about?
dictionary? Make your point. That's what they'd be saying.
You're just spouting words, but you don't really understand what they mean, and they're just parroting these arguments that.
And the experts disagree with them. Almost at any time they start talking about nothing and chance and random and all this stuff, it's like, no, experts don't talk like that. There's no.
It's not random. It's not chance.
It's not random. It's
there
not
are
chance.
mechanisms that work, but
exactly, there are good reasons to why life exists on this planet, and
and other planets too.
And possibly other planets too.
Abiogenesis. You literally just
brought up abiogenesis.
No, I literally just addressed you. And
you literally just
have it here because you said it, because you used it as evidence for Christianity, but it's not. So stop trying to prove deism and prove Christianity.
In my opening, I literally said, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. I literally was making the point that, hey, we could go down this, but we don't have to. Because there's all this other stuff. So the point I originally opened with, and you're obviously trying to dodge with the usual atheist move, I'm going to focus on this one little thing and say, oh, it doesn't matter, it doesn't prove anything, is from the macro level. If you're presented with 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 20, 100, 1,000 arguments and conclusions and deductions and logical constructs that would be evidence in favor of God, are you going to dismiss them?
If I ever were able to get a valid syllogism, maybe, but they don't make valid syllogisms. They make like first cause arguments, which contradict themselves. You can't have a cause before causality.
So you're found.
We're all conceding.
You made the foundational argument.
We're all conceding
that
we don't understand biogenesis.
It's abiogenesis. but the
We're conceding we
biogenesis
don't know exactly how. He thinks I don't know the difference. He's gonna try and be a smartass here.
elements
I
to the
know.
overall
It's
topic.
so.
I
But-
misspoke,
But going back to
we don't know
Amy,
how
you talked about
biogenesis
the
And notice how far away from Christianity we are right now. We're like in another galaxy.
we're conceding we don't fully understand abiogenesis, but where do we get to God from that?
I know. And it doesn't matter because I go over this all the time. They're always like, they never want to admit that life, that it has to have come from non life no matter what. That if your God made it, he like blew, the wording is like he blew into dust or whatever, or it started from a chemical reaction. Yeah, that doesn't matter which way. But then when you point that out to them, they want to change the subject.
They're okay with it as long as it's magic, but as
Yeah,
soon as you try and
exactly.
imply that it's not magic, that maybe there was some type of knowable cause, they don't like that.
there
He's
is no
explaining to
first
you,
cause
James, be
needed.
patient.
There is no first cause needed for the Big Bang.
No,
Incoherent concept. Incoherent. You are basically
Amy,
saying
you literally
before we
stated there is
have
no cause
causality.
requirement for the
Yeah, you
Big
said
Bang.
there's no need of a cause for causality. Do you have any idea how asinine that statement is? Where'd you pull that one out?
Well,
Yes,
if there's
because
no need for a
anything
cause
else-
for God, there's no need for a cause for something. There had to be something.
God is by his nature uncausable.
Okay, so
That's true,
therefore the
that.
universe might be by its nature uncausable.
You have no evidence for that.
So
You
you're
have no
saying
evidence. You have no evidence.
No, you have no philosophical justification. We have philosophical justification. You have nothing.
so you're
you
saying a
guys have
cause
been
happened
debating
for
the same
causality.
You have an
concepts for
assumption
years.
with absolutely no validity or reason to believe it other than it's not so. That the only reason you have to accept it is your own personal bias, and that's not a statement to trust for the nature of
So
reality.
you are saying something happened before causality. You're saying there was a
I'm
cause
saying that
before causes
something
could exist.
I'm saying something instigated the cause of causality.
Doesn't
The
that sound like the
ability for
cause?
Well,
Instigates,
Isn't
not
that a cause?
causes.
beginning of all that
Instigates.
is in our reality.
Someone
had to
get a
have very
dictionary.
beginning. It had to have something.
Yeah, I admit it's
Because
complicated shit. We don't fully understand it, but
it has to have
that's
something
the nature of the beast.
cause of it to be a causational framework. That means it cannot be by its nature caused by something causable. It has to be uncaused, unmoved, timeless, because it can't be constructed of the things which it originates.
Another incoherent concept.
Of course, it's
Absolutely.
not perfectly
Well,
valid. You guys just don't have anything else to refute it
Oh,
with. so
really?
just
You have an
say no.
example of timelessness?
Denialism.
Smokey, you have to look at it from the perspective that she also tried to bring up the puddle argument, which literally
that's
requires the suspension of intellect.
Right.
I don't think I did. I like the puddle argument.
The puddle argument is very good. It's nothing wrong with that argument.
Yeah, I don't think I.
Completely debunks fine tuning.
Like such. Oh, I use the word.
That's true. I should have brought up the
argument.
puddle argument.
I mean, she claims
He's
that
projecting
there's
it.
no found substantive syllogisms that have ever been presented. I think there's a hell of a
No
lot
valid
of atheist PhDs that would disagree with your position there.
Yeah, and you do realize, Amy, that's only a statement of your own
So
epistemology.
there's
You might have faulty logic, which you see.
atheist PhDs who think there's good philosophical evidence for God. Then why don't they believe he exists? I mean,
as evidence to something.
They all have
Just jump in here
PhDs in
real fast. I
atheism.
just want to give Amy and James a chance to respond because I think it's kind of a little one-sided. So, Amy, James, if you guys want to go ahead,
you think?
back to you, Maddox and Snoopy.
Well, what Maddox is saying is exactly what I said. You can't explain exactly how a biogenesis happened. I happen to have this book of Bronze Age writings that talks about a vegetarian talking snake with legs thwarting God's plan, and therefore millions and billions of people have to be tortured because some guy ate from the wrong fruit.
And I answer that.
And then we're going to have a Jewish zombie come back to act as a loophole to get around rules that God created. It's just, it's you're using these vague philosophical concepts and then you're shoehorning in a book written by Bronze Age goat herders who thought sprinkling birds' blood around he's gonna get triggered. Here he goes. For plague, who thought that putting different sticks where goats copulate would affect their fur. That's in your holy books. You have to take the whole thing. The genetics, the parts that you like, and well, the parts that we don't like, those are those are not mentioned. That Amy
So many straw mans.
make a comment. Not
No,
literal.
I
We're
offended. I don't think we're even in there yet. We haven't gotten to Christianity.
Yeah, we're still.
Yeah,
on
okay,
deism.
Amy. Yeah, you just keep being useless in the corner. That's fine. I'll engage James. That's okay. James, you
Okay,
know,
I'll keep on talking.
the assumption is, wait, did you
Yeah.
look up any actual exegesis or any actual commentary or scholarship on
And see,
Genesis 1?
this is what you do, Smokey, and I think you learned it from Maddox because
So
he's
you're just
gonna
not
cut
gonna
me
answer.
off here.
You're just gonna
Savvy.
deflect. You're just
It-
gonna deflect.
Yeah, I
just
should have a quick
I'm
observation.
trying to find out how
Smokey, is that-
honest you're willing to be to actually digest the text, or you're just looking for ways to falsify it. That's what I'm trying to get at, James. And you're
Well,
gonna try to dodge
Smokey,
that.
here's
Because
the
you
thing,
just straw
Smokey,
man the
okay?
claim. You keep straw manning what I believe,
It-
and I don't know if you're
it-
doing it intentionally.
That's mainstream Christianity.
I don't
If
give
it
a
sounds
crap
stupid,
what mainstream
it is
mainstream
stupid.
Christianity chased me away from the faith too. So you want to debate mainstream Christianity? Go find a mainstream Christian.
He's
Why you
Christianity
bugging me?
plus.
I'd like to hear any Christianity tonight.
Amy,
Well,
yeah, again, your inability to recognize any arguments or evidence is not our problem. Okay, so
Yes, it
James,
is because you're
let
in a
me go
debate.
into
You're
this.
supposed to try and convince me. I'm supposed to try and
I'm
convince
not
you.
in. No, I can't convince the
Smokey,
mentally
Smokey, hang on.
backwards degenerate that can't recognize evidence. I don't try to
Hey,
argue.
don't
with
project
tinfoil
like
hats.
that. That's not fair to yourself. Stop it.
So
Maddox, I know why you didn't want to have to do this again. Now I get it.
no, so Smokey, and the audience, because the whole purpose of this debate is obviously from the atheist perspective to just say deny, 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 nothing you say is valid. But ironically, they are again proving the fact that God exists because I'm a prophet. Obviously, that's sarcasm, not literal, for all you literalist idiots out there.
yeah, because you
But
know we're going to ask for proof of your claims, and you don't have any. And we're
I
not
think
going
the
to accept
more
what you give
crazy
us as
thing
who refuse
is that's not
to look at
crazy.
anything as having
There are
relevance
people out there
unless it proves the position in 100% entirety.
still going around claiming
And just
themselves
like
prophets.
I will not consider any of it, and I'm
Well,
going to just automatically.
I'd just like to see some proof.
Look at the overall macro view. So apparently, you do either refuse to, or you lack the intellectual capacity to look at anything beyond one stone in a mosaic. You can't step back and see the big picture. I mean, it's obvious
Well,
how
here's
small
what's
your
going
mind
on,
is
Maddox.
and how juvenile you clearly both are.
Well, here's what's going on, Maddox.
All
Okay,
right, homonyms.
so we're thrust into this world with a God who you've said, oh, you don't have to agree with his morality. If he wakes up one day and feels like drowning a bunch of babies, he's gonna drown babies. That's just the way it is. Nothing we can do. What are we gonna do about it? He's God. That's how he does things, and we have to ascertain his will for our lives so he doesn't kill us or do even worse things to us. Yet he refuses to communicate with us. He refuses to say anything to us. The only means we have of ascertaining his will is again a book of Bronze Age writings that if it says
Can you
things
stop
that happen to make sense,
stigmatizing it,
you
James? Can
agree
you
with
stop
that?
stigmatizing it when you
Well, I'm
try to
just
talk
telling
about
you.
sheep herders and stuff? Like, can you try to be less racist, just please? Just
I'm not
for the
being.
audience.
I don't know what race the people. I'm not racist. I don't know what race the people are.
Well,
I'm
I don't
just
know.
saying
You
the
seem to be
writings
pretty
don't make
condescending to
sense.
Jews. You seem to be pretty condescending to Jews. And by the
Eh,
way, James, you're
I'm not.
all of your crap talking about how fail all the statements and all the laws and all the things that the Jews adopted. Guess what? They're the only one to have survived among their contemporaries to modern day. So now maybe you as a
Actually, no, they didn't. They
for that, for this small little nomadic tribe historically managing to survive to modern day beyond a whole bunch of ancient powers much greater than them that persecuted them and tried to genocide them out of existence, yet they still survive to this modern day to do something unparalleled and refound their own nation once again. And you're going to say, well, God had nothing to do with it. Fine. Could you at least give credit to their freaking culture and their traditions that allowed them to survive to modern day? Or are you an anti-Semitic bigot
There-
that just wishes that they were extinct and that's why you hate their
Comment
laws?
after that.
their culture, it has nothing to do with who they are. They're no worse than anybody else, Smokey.
Appreciate
They all cultures have had theology, okay? And guess what? They're all wrong. The Jews are not more wrong than anybody else. It's just that Christianity is built on
Are
that.
they more
So
right?
that's why
Are they more
we're
right?
talking about it. It's not there's no evidence for their claims, Smokey. There's
You
no
said
evidence.
they're not more wrong, so are they more right?
They're not more wrong than all religions are wrong. Like you've heard
I'll
before.
go that step.
I go one God further, and this is the problem with what you guys do is when the evidence and the logic, when you think it's there to support your conclusion, you're happy to present it. But that's not really a requirement, because whenever you have a position that doesn't make sense or you can't wrap your head around it, you just say, well, that's God. He's too big. We can't understand. We can't comprehend him.
All right, this is a really dumb rabbit hole. I'd like to go
Wait.
back to one of the things.
Wait, can I make a point?
They're all dumb rabbit
Go
holes.
ahead.
Here he goes.
I know,
I'll
incoming
make the
trigger.
claim that the Jews are more wrong.
Oh yeah,
The giant majority of their holy book.
this is
and
when he calls you a Nazi.
I know.
Hinduism,
I
no
know.
other.
You're a closeted Nazi. I know. It's okay.
Jewish.
Yeah, well, maybe you're just a self-hating one then. I'm
Oh,
not.
Self-hating.
hello. Not speaking.
There
of
was some Jews
self-hating
that like
Jew,
to help.
huh?
There was some Jews that like to usher their fellow brethren onto the trains in Nazi Germany. You might have been one of them. So that
Oh, so you
Well,
broken
Oh,
God.
wow.
Well,
So,
how
yeah, I'm just like, wow.
Wow.
Didn't show up
James?
in
It is
Germany.
wow.
Did God showed up at the Exodus?
yeah,
We have
God
no
doesn't
evidence of
show
it.
up to mitigate the nature of the fall of man, which was part of the curse.
You might have liked the Holocaust. You might have
And he
watched,
doesn't
enjoyed it.
show up to violate the nature of free will that he established, which is basically what
He
you
does
were
when he
providing.
wants to, when he feels like it.
You guys would become slavers, which is
What is
actually
free-
really ironic because you guys claim to think slavery is bad, but you would turn
Yes.
humanity into slaves in order to instigate your will to mitigate suffering, or you would change reality in such a dynamic that would ultimately make it worse.
Well, let me jump in here for a second, Amy. Let me just make a quick point here. You know, the point here is that God has to allow things. He has to allow all these terrible things to happen and everything because of free will, right? He doesn't want to violate free will. But what is the ultimate end goal of all this? Well, the goal is to die and go to heaven and spend eternity with God. Now you ask them, what will anybody be able to sin in heaven? No, he's gonna make us incorruptible when we go to heaven. So we won't be able to sin up there. So is free will really all that important if your end state, if your perfection, your goal is to get to a state where you have no free will and you are just a zombie sitting in heaven for eternity, telling God how great he is because he made you specifically to be inferior to him. And you just have to sit there for eternity and say, God, you're so great. God, I love you. You're doing a really great job, God. You're a really good God. I really love you, God. I like what you've done with heaven, God. It's amazing. When you said streets of gold, you weren't kidding. 24 karat gold, God. Oh, God, you're doing a great job burning those sinners down in hell. Keep up the good work, God. Doesn't that sound, Amy, like the best time in the world?
Sounds like North Korea once
And you can
again.
spend eternity doing that. You can spend
I know.
eternity doing that, and you will never be tempted to drink a beer or to watch porn or do anything else because free will at the end of the day wasn't all that important anyway.
And why make this game? I don't get if his end game, the plan is to just have everyone in heaven, why not just make everyone in heaven? Why this whole shit called life?
Because we're down here and they had to come up with an explanation as to what we're doing down here. So hey, it's a testing ground or whatever. It's ancient man just trying to rationalize, trying to make sense out of the reality that they found themselves in. It doesn't make sense, but it's all they had to work with at the time. They didn't know literally anything.
Also, they misunderstand my point. When I say the Jews are more wrong than others, I just mean I believe L. Ron Hubbard, I believe Joseph Smith, I believe Muhammad, and generally I believe Jesus were real people. Regardless of you think any of them were con men, whether they believed it or not, generally speaking, there's evidence for them. But Moses and Noah and Adam and Eve, there's no evidence for these people. It's not that I dislike, it has nothing to do with even the Jews. It's just these are ancient myths. And not only that, the Jews were using them as ancient myths. So the Jews know that. It's the Christians and the Muslims.
It's a contrived history. It's a post hoc, just made up after the fact. Hey, we got here somehow. How did we get here?
Yes, it's people
Oh,
who
by
did
the way, look at those really big buildings in Egypt. Actually, we were there and we built that for them. They made us build it, so we made all that stuff. I mean, it's almost like
or if anything, it was like,
Yeah.
yes, my son, I will tell you the story, and it was great. And then 1,000 years later, no, this is what happened. This is what literally happened, and I will go to death for this. So yeah,
and I mean
nursery rhymes gone wrong.
that's one thing they use to say to support their claim is that the apostles died. I mean, these people were willing to die for their faith, Amy. They wouldn't be willing to die for something.
Would you die for a lie?
Would you die for a lie? I mean,
line.
yet the Buddhist monks who douse themselves in gasoline and lit themselves on fire to protest war, but yet we still have war. I mean, we've always have had. We probably will for some time now, but they believed pretty strongly that there should not be war. So
We also produced an experiment on 9/11, and it turns out, yes, you can die for things that we don't think are true. Turns out, yep, absolutely. So it doesn't seem to matter one way or which god.
yeah.
But yeah, back to the triggering.
Yes, back to the triggering.
James,
What does this
I
have to do
really
with free will, Smokey? What does it have to do
want
with free will?
free will is an essential
Christianity.
component of
Okay,
reality.
so
because
what
without
are we
the
saying that
existence of free
violates
will-
that?
Yes, James. When you say that you believe that God should have done it differently or imposed things differently or micromanaged the choices of people in order to keep things from maybe having to wipe people out from their horrible decisions of wanting to slaughter children and brutalize their servants, and the Jews were sent in to stop all of this. See, you would have preferred God to do it different. Which
I mean, all those bad things happen today and nobody blinks, bats an eye. God doesn't do anything about it.
from a hyper-Calvinistic perspective, and I don't hold that.
We hear
So
crickets
I
from
agree.
God.
I understand that atheists are generally extremely predeterministic in their own worldview, and they try to smuggle that into the God claim, and that's a problem because it means that pretty much every challenge you're making is extremely fallacious and a straw man, certainly from anything I believe.
Well, I haven't made the moral argument. I conceded to Maddox. If the God exists, then he's right. Mike
Morally,
makes right.
the
If
Jews
he
were
wants,
right. Morally,
if-
the Jews were right, which
if
is what
God
makes
wants to
Amy
do
a
things-
moral
morally, they were right about what?
defend all the child rapists and
Yahweh
were the
is
Jews
a
right
monster.
about?
horrible things in the Canaanite regions. Amy thinks it was horrible to stop those things.
Do
Amy
you
wanted those
think-
people to continue brutalizing people because Amy enjoys that, I guess. That's good moral structure.
He only
Smoke
stopped it back then.
loves
He
it.
doesn't do anything today.
Yeah. James, I
When
want to track
Yahweh commands people to do genocide, Smokey is like, go
genocide. Yeah,
rape,
commands
go
them to
take
go
all
stop
the
people
little
who are
ones from
genociding.
ourselves and all the women and virgins
No,
from
you don't get to
ourselves. Yahweh
separate from the
told me.
narrative that those weren't actually children; those were born of the Nephilim. You like to try and leverage
Born
that
Oh my God.
inside the narrative.
Yeah,
Wow.
they like to
No,
wipe away
evidence for
genocide a
Nephilim.
few
Any
times.
evidence outside of scripture for
Nothing
Nephilim?
other than the narrative. Nope. And by the way, if you expect regular bones that wouldn't have any chance of fossilization to survive to modern day, you're being ridiculous. So anyway, let's
So
get
he has no evidence for Nephilim except
I wanted-
vague references in the Old Testament. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
well, fossilized or mineralized or gone through some method of preservation. These people that were slaughtered in these regions weren't given proper burials. They were left out for the forces. They were left out to disintegrate, intentionally so. And by the way, that was nature of what was to deal with.
So there was never one who died anywhere else. They only died in these slaughterings. They didn't die in the flood. What if we said that contradicts that?
I already addressed that, James. I don't want to go really chew down that rabbit hole because I don't think you're capable of following it. I really want to go back.
Oh yeah, Smokey. I'm not capable. Totally
And
incapable,
having them
Smokey.
count 57.
Totally not capable. I can't keep up with you, Smokey.
Majority of history, a lot of scientists were actually theists or deists or
Yeah, and they looked into the claims and they found out they're not true.
survey.
So they
51%
stopped being theists.
I didn't save it for the debate. 2006, 51% of scientists believe in a higher power or a god. So that yet none of these scientists ever weigh out, propose, or put out hypotheses were actually substantiating any part of that. They only focus on proposing hypotheses of naturalistic mechanisms. This means that scientists will actually violate their biases to stay within the constraints of what they're actually critiquing. Otherwise, it'd be an argument from authority fallacy. Like expecting scientists to weigh in on the existence of God is tantamount to expecting theologians to weigh in on science.
They're not expecting him to science to weigh on the existence of God. That's a philosophical question, but we can test the claims that are made about it.
Yep.
You can't test for his existence, but you can test the claims that are made.
Go ahead and respond.
Right. So your religion, it makes a lot of untestable claims about this God, right? We can't scientifically test. Okay.
Correct.
Unfortunately,
Because
it
he's not
makes other
naturalistic.
claims too. And when we test those claims, a lot of times they
Is
fail.
God
They fail
naturalistic?
pretty often.
So if we had a
He
miracle,
doesn't exist,
hold
so
on.
he's not anything. He's
Well,
a
that's just
creation
your
of the human
assertion and
mind.
your opinion.
It
That doesn't
is.
mean anything.
Well,
So it doesn't
that's
mean
all we
anything.
have.
No, we only have your opinion. We got a lot
We
more than
only
that,
have
James.
our own
Yeah,
opinions.
you're not. I promise you're not quick enough to be judging for everyone's status. Okay.
Not quick enough, Smokey. No.
Do you know what the word ad hominem is? Have you
Yes,
ever
I
heard that
do.
term?
It's applying someone's nature to the characterization and then applying that to the argument they're presenting.
Yeah, do you
See,
think
and
that
I'm not
we've done
ad
that a
homing,
dozen
Amy. Let me
times
explain the
already?
difference to you since you're too slow to catch what an ad hominem is.
Okay.
An ad
you-
hominem
Triggered saint.
to the argument, and that's not what I'm doing. The nature of your character, which is the attack of the Jews in a disgusting, fallacious, presentist, bigoted way, is a argument in and of itself to your disgusting, substandard, inferior character. Okay, that's its own argument.
Cool that
Has
you
nothing
feel
to
that
do-
way. I'm glad
It
you
has
feel
nothing
that
to
way.
do with your inability to
personal, right?
recognize anything that we're actually saying. Okay, thanks.
It's not. You're
Oh,
making
Maddox
ad
is enjoying all
hominems,
this.
and then when I point out
Maddox is just
why
sitting there
entitlement-
smirking,
Yes.
letting
I already
American
showed that
anti-Semite.
that's just you wanting to indulge.
He'd probably be kicking Smokey if he was in the room with him, like, "Hey, Smokey, lay off. This is not really."
Because you're a presentist bigot and you enjoy those ancient cultures not being
Cry about it. I'm
from doing
politically
their
incorrect.
horrible, disgusting practices. You enjoy that. You like to promote, I guess, murder and rape. That's ultimately your secret
I would
fetish.
never
You just
promote
enjoy that.
Yahweh's motto.
Murder and rape.
Oh, well, you
Murder and rape.
promote the cultures that he stopped. You enjoyed that, I guess. Yeah.
He only stopped it long ago and far away where there's no evidence for what he did.
And stopping
Doesn't do anything today.
disgusting,
Jews. I
horrible
love my parents.
who
They're
are
good people.
burning their
They have
children
the best
alive on
equipment.
altars to Moloch and engaging in bloodletting rituals and killing their servants at whim, something the Jews were never allowed to do. Everyone in the Jewish realm had to have the same value of life, slave even for a slave master. You are such
Because if you beat them and they died that day, you were guilty. But if they died a couple days later, you were okay.
Exactly, that makes it right.
I would send a rabbi.
So their God is so much more enlightened than their neighbors.
Blood, and then that would undo.
Well, yeah, I don't know
everyone's
why
bad
you
deeds. It
don't.
makes
You don't
perfect
have
sense.
nothing to you is morally wrong, Amy.
What do you mean
Everything's
nothing to me. No,
Go ahead and
I'm in a
let her
moral.
respond.
Okay,
Neurosis.
everybody.
not a
This is
moral
going.
relative.
We're degenerating into.
This is where he's gonna get really condescending. I think he comes to me about my son.
What amazes me
Oh,
about
they're gonna start
all
now.
these conversations, and this is
He's like, "Oh, do you have a son, James, or a child?" Yeah.
Christianity.
Oh, really? Oh,
The
fuck.
all of these supposed negatives that are being tossed out.
Trying to say we can't understand it because we're like children to God.
Then the entire premise from a
He's
Christian
he's our daddy and he loves us.
Huh.
And
literally
sometimes he has to set rules that we don't understand.
for everybody to be immortal and to not have to experience any negatives after this stage of existence.
Right.
And if you so the point where I'm going with all this is, and I've used this analogy, other people have used similar analogies. If I know Amy does not. James, do you have any kids?
I do.
Okay. When you boy, girl, both?
A son. He'll be 11 in January.
Okay, I've got a
His
daughter.
mother is Jewish, by the way.
Okay, I've got a daughter. She's 10. She'll be 11 next summer. When you first held your son, did you have the moment of realization that you were ultimately responsible for their existence and like ongoing survival?
It's something you can only understand when you're in that position. It's a very surreal feeling. I'm sure you understand.
Absolutely. Now, after you took your son home and those first days, they slept a lot, but after the little timeout you get,
a little bit.
Did your son start screaming, crying, and freaking out when he crapped his diaper?
Yeah, from time to time they do.
Okay, so from his perspective,
several times a day, trust me.
Having a dirty diaper or a wet diaper, whatever, was the worst thing that ever happened to him at that point in his life, in his existence, right?
Probably so.
Okay. At
Except I imagine the birthing process probably wasn't too pleasant either, but
two,
I don't remember mine.
and they fall over and like cut his leg, and he screamed and cried, was experiencing intense pain, all that kind of stuff. Was that the most traumatic thing that had happened to him at that point?
Probably, yeah.
All right. At 5, when he first
Shit, I remember me falling off a bike and hurting myself, and it was pretty traumatic. I don't even have to.
Okay,
I understand.
Okay, so you extrapolate all this out. Now, when he
So
reaches
extrapolate
your age,
all this
and
to
you as an
hell.
adult, when you look back to similar instances in your own life, do you chuckle at how, at the moment when it occurred, it seemed like the world was ending?
No, of course.
Okay, when you had in high school, when you had your first heartbreak, was it just like devastating? You thought you would never love anyone ever again?
It happens to everybody.
Okay, so at each stage, and I'm sure other things similar in this context have happened as you've gotten older and older and older, right? Like there's things that's oftentimes they're even more, they're actually real, they have real significance, right? And like paradigm shifts in your life. Have you ever looked back on any of them and been like, I learned a lot from that?
Sure.
And now I am
It's part
actually
of life.
a more substantive person than I would have been if I'd never experienced that.
Are you trying to make that's the morality argument? Are you trying to make?
I'm making just a basic common sense argument.
It's the meaningfulness argument, dude.
If God is the parent, and he knows that just like you did when your son fell off his bike, and you knew it was not the end of his life.
Do you know why this analogy doesn't work? Because
Why not?
you held your son. Like you physically held your son. And
I
there's
did.
nothing like that with a God. It is not like he can come down, though they claim that he wants a personal relationship. There is no evidence of an actual personal relationship.
And this is what I said before is that this God, he would have the ability to communicate with us, but for whatever reason, he chooses not to. So the
Yes.
only way we have to know what he wants us to do so he doesn't kill us is to read these ancient texts, okay? But the problem is when we read them, we find a lot of stuff in there that just isn't true.
Yeah,
So
isn't true or rather nasty.
so what you're saying is God spoke to ancient man in ways that they could understand, and even as far as letting things go in the book that really aren't 100% true, but it's what they understood because God couldn't go back and explain germs and stuff like that to ancient man, or they would have thought the book is crazy. This doesn't make any sense. Nobody would have paid attention to the writings. But then we have to look at a revelation made for them, and we have to look past all that and say, well, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but we're going to believe it anyway.
Exactly. And it's how many atrocities get committed is by people saying, look, do this thing and we'll worry about it afterwards, or we'll worry about it after death. They'll sort things out in the end. God will sort things out. He sorts out everyone. Yeah, why don't we just not do the terrible thing right now?
And that's the thing that that's one of the reasons I think people cling to God, to theism, is they want there to be a sense of justice in the world. We look around, we see bad things happening to good people, and we see bad people doing things and getting rewarded for it. So we want there to be a sense of justice in the end, that after we die, God's going to make all that right. So we don't really
Yeah,
have to worry about it.
it doesn't feel quote unquote fair to us. But we have to constantly remind ourselves that, Mother Nature is cold. Mother Nature is in nothing, is in chemicals, is in science.
So if you have a child or a family member and they get cancer and they die, that's a tragedy. That's so hard to get over
Very
with. But
sad.
if you can say, well, they're not really gone, they're just up in heaven, and I'll get to see them one day, and you're short circuiting that grieving process
It doesn't let you cope.
with this crutch. And then what ends up happening is when you do that enough times, you need that crutch so badly that if you were to even think about giving it up, you would have to come to terms with all these things that you've bypassed, your own mortality, uh, the finality of death for friends and family that you're never going to get to see again. you know it's tough.
It does. It kind of, I guess, in that way, you can almost see it as a weight. You're almost by admitting there's none of that. You are admitting it's coming to terms with that. Everyone, dies,
With
but
reality, yeah,
with
with reality.
reality. But that's exactly. But it is something we do as adults. I mean, I don't
It,
know.
it it's tough, and that's why you
Tough.
understand why these people cling to it so fervently. It allows them to hold these irrational beliefs that make things seem better, but it helps some people,
Yes.
but
So
it's not real.
that which is the only thing that matters. Is it real? Is it true? Can you
And
prove
that's why I've told people, I've said, if you're happy as a Christian and you just want to go to church and you want to worship your God, you want to do all that, and you're content with that, then don't go around asking too many questions. Don't try to peer behind the curtain, because you might not like the answers that you find. You might wish that you didn't know w- the answers that you found.
Well,
You
there's
know,
two ways to become an atheist. That's read the Bible cover to cover and go on the internet. And
yeah.
either one of those things seems to trend
The
more
the
towards
internet is
atheism.
where religion goes to die, because its claims can be analyzed and debunked and researched, and you can look up and see rebuttals. You can look at all sides of the argument, and you say, wow, their arguments really aren't very convincing when you consider the other side. They're only convincing to those who are desperately, who really really want to be convinced, who
And you
need
have
to
to
be.
go to material that, if you go on like a source, even like a lay source like Wikipedia, all of a sudden, all of the claims get put side by side, and all of a sudden, they're all kind of equal and they're all silly instead of just having like one source. Uh,
Yeah, it's where religion goes to die. James at Modern Day Debate says where debaters go to die. He's got that up in the corner. The
I
title
know
is
I
blurred,
saw
but
that where
yeah,
debaters go to die.
where debaters go to die. But it's a really good platform, and I'm glad James has it, because I have a lot of fun on there and get to see some interesting debates. Get to participate once in a while.
Yeah. All right, let's go back.
See,
I think
let's
they
go
were
back.
really
First
triggered.
perspective was, why would you let this happen? Right? Why did this happen to me? Well, if God knows that we are immortal and have an immortal soul, and everything is in place for us to be able to have eternal existence, but the things we're going through right now are ways for us to learn and appreciate our very existence in and of itself on a fundamental level. How is God allowing things that at the moment in time seem to be this most horrific thing, but when you actually look at it from the macro view, are just like the way you look at things, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how much I freaked out. I thought the world was going to end when I fell off my bike when I was 5, now that I'm 35.
Okay, but I mean that still doesn't establish that the fact that he likely exists. Just yeah, it's a rationalization for his
Okay.
things that happen. It
Yeah.
doesn't point to him existing.
So again,
But
I literally just use that as
He's just saying, what if it's too complicated for us to understand right now? But they at the same time are claiming that they understand it, right? Or am I
or
crazy
not that they
here?
understand it, but they might not understand it, but they will one day when they get to heaven, and God is up there, so he must have a good reason for things. And even if we don't know what it is right now, he's got our best interest in mind. He knows what's best for us, right?
But you shouldn't believe things until you understand it. That does
It doesn't mean it's likely to be true. That's what I was saying.
exactly.
the pieces. Like there's multiple pieces of the evidence. Again, you're doing exactly what I talked about in my opening statement, which was, well, this doesn't prove every single aspect about God's existence. Therefore, let's dismiss it.
I'd just like to see one bit of proof. A philosophical construct. It's not. It's assume he
Well,
is
we're so
real,
far away
and
from
and what
Christianity
you're
right
saying
now.
is believe first, ask questions later. Assume he's real, and then everything will work itself out. And oh, okay, well maybe it kind of makes sense. Maybe he's like a parent and teaching us, and maybe my brother getting cancer and dying was just to teach me something about life, or maybe because God likes to punish people for things that their ancestors did. Maybe my great grandpa pissed God off, so he stricken him with cancer. I don't know, but it all works in your theology because we can't understand God. He's smarter
That's,
than us. He's
by the way, James, just so you know, real quick, that might be our theology, but it's not our soteriology. And you should learn the difference, because what you've done this entire debate is pretty much straw man every single Christian belief I have. And I don't know how well you've actually been paying attention to anything I've been saying on my channel, but you have an extremely predeterministic view of reality. And you have dragged that into the perspective and critique of the Christian God claim. And I don't hold that, and neither does Maddox.
well, I know you have a more nuanced version.
See, like,
of
well, you look at it
Christianity.
like God killed your brother. God
on.
killed your grandma.
Well,
That's how you're.
I don't have a brother who died. That was just something that
That
is an example I made. That was just an example of what he's saying, that God does things to help us and to guide us and to teach us, and maybe, but it still doesn't really provide any evidence that he's actually there. It could be all just happening because shit happens in life.
I just
It's
want to
all
add,
unguided.
that it assumes that that the evil in this world isn't as bad as it really is. That really there is something that is going to have a judgment for it. But if someone had something horrible, locked in their basement, raped for years, begged, nothing came, I do not think, and I cannot see any reason why this would happen, and why what is the learning from it, where what judgment, because there's no judgment that's going to undo that. That really is the evil. It's not falling off your bike, it's not pooping your diaper. There really is evil, and as far as we can tell, that God would just be watching.
Amy, if I may, you seem to always ask why there's so much evil. Have you ever bothered to ask why there isn't more?
It could be worse.
Is it more?
It could be worse.
It's almost exactly what would happen in a
Well,
system
see,
with
then
animals.
it's your fallacy is a fallacy of perspective, because you can't actually justify an understanding of what a reality with more evil would look like.
Because God could have serial killers and rapists on every street corner. He doesn't have them on every street corner, so
Therefore, God.
So the
give him
idea
credit for that.
that
Yeah.
you're assuming
We're not all being
God
raped and murdered
is to
every
assume that
second
what
of
exists
every
right now is the
Day,
maximum
or-
day. Yeah.
evil. But it could be mitigated and scoped by a divine mind, just like the fine tuning for the rest of the universe, which you
Isn't-
also deny has a cause, a purpose, or anything.
Also, isn't that like shut up? I could beat you worse. That's like I hit you, and you complain, and
Hit-
they're like, "Shut up! I still let you live."
His argument is just fallacious on so many levels. I forgot that he made that argument. Now that I hear it again, that is just what a high standard for God. Like he could make sure there's no evil, but he could do
come
more.
down- He could come down and kick your ass if he wanted to. It's like, wow, okay, God, calm down.
He could make it so there was a child molester in every classroom all over the country, constantly victimizing kids. He doesn't do that, so give him credit for that.
And it's like, yeah, but why? And they're like, but he does it. And you're like, yeah, but okay.
There's still far too much evil, and he doesn't have to permit any of it.
Also, the point I was trying to make is this looks exactly like there's 50% good and 50% like people. It looks exactly like a system of people just doing things, and what you
That's what I said.
from like a gradient of people.
Maybe it's just shit happens because the world is fucked up and bad things happen. There's no rhyme or reason or lesson behind it. It's just shit happening in nature.
Exactly.
Reason behind it.
Could you admit it could be an evil God? It could be a God that actually likes to see rape and murder, and that this is what he actually rewards.
No, that's a Cartesian challenge to the nature of God, and it's self-refuting. It's fallacious, because then
Don't
there's
see
no. Well, because then what happens is you have evil being good, which means you have the inverse of the recognizability of what is evil and good. So and the idea of that the Christian God claim, the reason why it's coherent, Amy, is because goodness is a co-eternal component of God. So God couldn't, by his nature, create a reality where evil is good, because it would violate who he is. So that's like challenging.
What does that even mean?
Impossible in order
I
to prove
don't
he's
know.
God. It doesn't.
But that's just a claim in the Bible. It could be that there's an evil God. It's just, I mean, just because the Bible says there's a good God doesn't mean there is a good God.
Well, but you're taking the idea that if there was you're basically a Maltheist then, if there's a God and he's evil.
I mean, it just looks like a universe where there's no God. It looks like exactly the right amount
But
of
how
good
would
and
you
evil
know?
you'd
You
expect
have no
from
other,
animals.
but you have no other universe to compare that to. So how would you know? A universe
Because we
with
can
no
see
God.
good and evil
Wait,
actions.
Okay, so a universe with no God, would it have all the fine-tuning variables it does, or no?
A universe, yes, because the fine tuning is just saying that if it was any different, us ourselves would not be able to exist. But there may
If we couldn't be here, we wouldn't be here.
benefit from different
Which
Yeah.
variables.
You just asserted
Well,
without
Smokey,
proof.
It's
let me-
really
let me
just
let me answer
wordplay.
real quick.
If we couldn't be here, we wouldn't be here.
Like real
Just
rebut
cosmologists. Don't tell me
atheist
how bad it is.
cosmologists
Rebut it.
literally say that is a stupid argument.
I disagree with your premise, and they don't think so. So I guess we're even.
Yes, they do. Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
I'd love to see Amy
Cool.
debate a scholar.
Right.
Even a liberal
Okay,
one,
yeah, I
actually.
mean, I'm open to it. I'm not a liberal, but but I'll take it.
That whole it could be something else argument has been flayed for years at this point.
Let me ask a question, Smokey. You tell me what you believe. What do you believe as far as the biblical narrative for Babel? Do you believe that was a literal event?
I think you were roboting super hard there, bro. I'm sorry.
I think you said something about the Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel. Do you believe
Okay.
that? I want to straw man what you believe.
Sure,
Do you
appreciate
believe
it.
that's
Thank
a
you.
literal story as written in Genesis?
Well, and you say that literal was such a hard line, and I know what you mean when you're doing it. You're kind of trying to lay the trap for it. Do I believe it's an actual historical event?
Just
Such a
asking what you
hard
believe,
line.
Smokey.
It's just funny because such a hard line is like true or not.
All-encompassing and hyper-specific and full of minutia and detail? No. Do I believe it's corroborated with other cultures that also have an unbroken cultural chain back almost as far as the Jews? Yes, including China. China has records of the Tower of Babel, also the flood narrative and creation events that.
But he doesn't believe in a
Wow.
global flood.
Also
That's so
have an
funny. He went
unbroken
like all in
cultural
at the very
history
end.
of
Did you
near
see
He
that?
doesn't believe in a global flood.
They record similar events, and since the rule
Oh, well, he changed his mind since then?
I don't know exactly why he's doing that, but he doesn't believe in a global flood. Now he's saying that the Chinese have legends about it, or I guess he's saying it was a flood in the Levant, and that when they migrated, they took their story with it. They took the story of the flood, but they forgot the whole thing about God. They decided, hey, let's keep the story about the flood, but let's go ahead and make up a whole new set of theology around it, right?
So basically, even though it's different God or even no God, it's still confirmation of the massive flood, even though we do have cultures that have no floods at all or have no flood stories.
And the linguistic issue is that we know that this is not how languages diverged. It wasn't from one event in
Yeah.
Mesopotamia and everybody spread out from there. That is not how it happened at all.
I mean, I make fun of all the stories, but I always make fun of the Tower of Babel because I think I almost said it in here, is that it's basically a nursery rhyme. It's like these stories are like, and then everyone tried to outsmart God and they built a tower really tall and they're like, look how awesome we are. And God was really mad and he took his hand down. He was like, smack, and he hit the tower. Like these are stories.
Well,
And yet
obviously,
we have to take them seriously because supposed theologians come forward.
well, that's why I'm trying to get him to say what he thought about it, and he does it in a very convoluted way so that it can be malleable to.
Well, he prefaced it. Like that whole preface, like that was great. That was like like he was like laying a foundation. He like knew he was about to say something very, I don't want to say crazy, because the Tower of Babel taken literally is,
And I've talked to him about this, not in actually in a private conversation um, with him. It wasn't like private. It was just happened to be just me and him in the room at the time. Nobody else was there. But I asked him what he thinks about that, and he was candid, and but I said, because obviously the story goes is that they built this tower, and it got really tall, and apparently it was some kind of threat to God. And of course, Brett would never say that it was a legitimate threat to God, but that's what the text seems to imply.
once again, also, what threat was there besides his, like, him? I hate to make this. Well, I mean, it sounds like God has a tiny penis. I mean, like, really? You have to go down
Uh,
there and wreck
and
people because they made a giant tower?
yeah, and the thing is that that story only makes sense from the standpoint of human beings who had never been up more than maybe a few hundred feet off the ground ever. No
I
human
know.
had ever been in the clouds or
Wow,
been
I never
up.
thought about this, but aren't we defying that every day? Don't we, like, beat out the Tower of Babel? Doesn't, like,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
landing on the moon kind of, like, surpass?
right. We've
Never
sent
even thought
probes
about
out of the
that.
solar system. Yeah. We've sent probes out of the solar system. And you know what they've seen as far as God? Nothing. Not a damn thing. We look out there, we look in telescopes, we look billions of light years away, and you know what we see? Nothing. We see space, we see stars, we see the same shit that is all around us. We don't see any evidence of God. So why he was afraid, and why he felt that this building was a threat to him and he needed to come down and personally intervene, it just strains credulity. It's not
Very
a believable story.
Unless you understand that he's jealous, which is
And
a human quality that most humans, that a lot of humans could even get over.
I mean, to his credit, he I believe he's a sincere person. He believes he doesn't understand everything, but he does believe it. But you
No,
know,
I agree. I think they believe the stuff they believe. It's just,
it, it's just
well, the problem is that both of them believe, for, I would assume, because I know Maddox's reason, and I would like to hear Smokey's reason. What it normally is that they believe for an irrational reason, and then what they do is they then search for dozens and dozens of rational reasons. And so the problem is that we're not even talking about the stuff that really converted them or why they believe. We're talking about the common apologetics that are used to convince, quote unquote, the skeptics.
yeah, because anecdotal evidence really isn't very convincing. So if they tell a story about what happened to them, that doesn't really resonate with a lot of people. So so they have to look for these rational reasons for why they believe, like you said, they have to develop apologetics and such. And I've always said, just story of the Tower of Babel, it's a very convoluted, factually inaccurate story. It really doesn't make any sense as written. It only makes sense from the standpoint of humans who had never been more than 100 feet off the ground, whereas heaven, it's got to be up there in the clouds somewhere, because to them, the clouds might as well be Jupiter, or they might as well
Exactly.
be Betelgeuse to
They were
us.
never expecting to get to the clouds or beyond the clouds.
So if you build a tall building, you just keep building, building, and building and building. Eventually, you'll get to heaven, right? Not to mention that we can't build buildings that tall because there's logistical and structural problems. You just can't
Yeah.
build forever. But no matter how tall they built, they wouldn't have even got 1/10% of the way to the moon. And again, we've been there, and there's nothing to see for God.
No God yet.
No, we haven't seen anything yet, but that's just one example of a story that is very hard to believe. Now, if that were the only thing in the Bible, that were the only difficulty, the only challenging thing to wrap your head around, you might be able to say, well, there's just this one thing I don't understand. So maybe their theology, maybe their excuses and rational, maybe that's true.
He's
But you have to do that over and over and over and over again, literally page after page. You need rescuing devices and theology, and eventually at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself and say, "This is so batshit crazy that I have to
exactly.
come up with all these rationalizations and quirks of logic to somehow make this true. Maybe it's just not true."
And once again, taking a literalist position, even though it sounds like he's trying to take a middle ground, it really is a literalist position. I mean, to me, that's just easy to bat. These are easy to disprove wrong. So I don't know why. It's much easier to just say, well, this is just a metaphor. This was really what they were saying, is that we were getting too haughty for ourselves and it didn't actually happen, but we're supposed to take this wisdom from it. To go the literal route is, to me, it's setting up for failure. We can prove, just like you were saying, with structural integrity, they'd run out of ozone. They'd eventually, there's a whole bunch of logistic reasons for why
Gravity, the
gravity,
building
yeah.
material that they had.
Um, so yeah,
Why
it's
do you
just a
think
very odd position to take.
Why do you think now we're building taller than we built, 100 years ago, but we're not building. We don't have any buildings that are 5 miles tall. It's just there's just a limit to how tall you can physically go before things start to not work anymore.
Nor is there really a use. It's kind of impractical and just a whole bunch of.
Yeah, again, it only made sense from the standpoint of humans who had never been more than a few hundred feet off the ground. The clouds might as well be Jupiter or Betelgeuse or the Orion Nebula
And it
to them.
makes sense from a group of people who didn't actually know how languages spread and they needed a reason.
Yeah, exactly. That's hey, everybody has different languages. How'd that happen if everybody came from one family got off the ark? How do we have all these languages from there? Well, hey, God came down and made them different
Nice
just
big
because.
tower.
Just because.
Just
Well, like Aaron Ra even says, when we climbed the mountain, we saw God wasn't there. Then we went to the clouds. God wasn't there either, and now he's outside the universe because we can't disprove that, right?
exactly. Though
He's in another dimension.
we ever find a multiverse or other dimensions and other that, they'll push it back even further.
Exactly.
Of thumb of ancient scholarship of discerning whether or not an event took place. If you find one record of the event, you tend to believe it's true. If you find two, you take it for almost an absolute fact, especially if they're from corroborating cultures that didn't have any interaction with each other but have record of the same event. So yes, I do believe there's.
So in the future, when people find Superman comic books, they find more than one copy of it. They're going to assume it's true. Then the linguists who say that's not how.
Also,
language
New
evolved,
York
you would say they're wrong.
exists,
and then
therefore,
your book,
Spider-Man's real.
on that.
No, and again, you're requiring. This is you ignored what I said in my opening statement about your requirement of minutia and specificity. The method of which God confusing tongues is not revealed. So the idea of it being done by
Does he believe in
the
tongues?
separation of tribes, which then
He means languages.
Okay.
Collections of
Okay.
He's not a Pentecostal, so he
over times in these collective regions.
he would say that applied only to the period right after when the church was being formed, to aid in them converting people who couldn't understand.
Some sort of specific scientific,
but not that it applies today.
Otherwise, you disbelieve it, and it's a fallacy. He was communicating to ancient peoples and languages and methods that they were able to understand.
But he won't communicate with us what we can understand.
Couldn't it just been that it was a story that a bunch of people who are trying their best to figure things out wrote down, and that was the explanation they used until we found out the actual answer?
Yeah, you can go ahead and believe contrary to scholarship, Amy, and again, that's a you problem. Just to protect your bias, but that's not an argument for me.
There's no scholarship for the Tower by Babel. I'm just going to point that out. There's no modern
what did I just say? What did I just say? The rule of scholarship
contradicted
have two corroborating accounts, which we do, And what mainstream secular scholarship predominantly accepts as a conclusion is ultimately irrelevant, Amy. Just like James's stupid point about all the things being added into scripture, the only evidence James has for that is a few liberal scholars that took the updating of language with time and took that to be actual full-blown insertions, and they have no evidence for that. There's no actual textual historical evidence, and he said so himself. They actually look at literary stylings to make these assumptions, and
So
no
they're
one beyond
conservative
the last
scholars?
30 or 40 years has been doing that, except these hyper liberals attempting to make names for themselves. And poor useful idiots like James, sorry to say, James, are the first to run
Thank
over
you,
there and
Smokey.
try and fight it up because it helps protect their bias. It's gross.
Well, thank you for that commentary there, Smokey. I appreciate it. But as I was saying, well, let me preface this is that when we read the Bible, we expect things to make sense. When you're telling us that a supremely
Makes sense to
knowledgeable,
who?
supremely wise, again, because your God
Makes sense
refuses
to
to
who,
communicate
James?
to the reader, to the person who is
Oh,
intended
everyone.
to receive the information, right? Because God refuses to communicate directly with us. He pretends like he's not there. You have these old books. So if that's our only way of ascertaining what he wants us to do, or he's going to do really bad things to us, then he better be pretty clear in those texts what exactly he wants us to believe and what he wants us to do.
This is the Romans 9 challenge, James, unfortunately, which is the subversion of the finite agent attempting to demand what the infinite agent should do or construct. So what you're saying is God is not allowed.
What he's saying is tough shit. God's not going to communicate in ways that you can understand. He's not going to be clear. Suck it.
Problem, James, I wanted to answer your original inquiry
Yeah,
about the
basically.
necessity and
He's
essentiality
not
Basically,
going to prove himself.
of the agent of free will. And it's the
believe
same
it or
both-
turn or burn, believe it or whatever. I don't know.
the idea that you could somehow program a woman to love you, no matter how well you could program that woman to love you, it still would be a faux love. It'd be fake. No matter how good you would program it, no matter how good you would, succeed to the Turing test, it would still ultimately, in the end, be fake. You made it happen.
Just like we'll be in heaven, we'll be
Create
fake.
a dynamic environment of actual free will, where the manifestation of the choice actually has meaning instead of just a pre-programmed event. See, a God that wants to love is going to want to be loved, and only in an environment of free will expression can such a thing
I don't know
be
what's their
expressed.
obsession with
So
love.
you are
It's
required
always love and
to
goodness and
manifest something.
So if somebody
Just
comes up
making
to
it
you,
up.
Amy, and says, "I want you to love me, but if you don't, I'm gonna kill you," is that really a loving
I
person?
would say
No,
I
you need
love
to
you,
deal
and
with
then
it,
I would
right?
I'll tell you
run.
what,
That's what he
James.
wants
I'll
to
tell
do.
you what.
Deal with it.
I'll tell you what. Can you think of any evidence that is immune to skepticism?
But yes, that's a mob boss.
Mathematics, maybe, perhaps. I don't know.
That's a field. I mean, like evidence of a conclusion of something that would be
There are very
completely
few things
beyond
outside of
skepticism.
mathematics that we know with absolute certainty. So
Well, but
there's
mathematics
always
isn't abstract. I want you to pull it into the tangible. Like for instance, the cup sitting in front of you. If you have a cup sitting in front of you or whatever. Imagine you have a cup sitting in front of you. You have a cup sitting in front of you. How certain are you that cup exists and it's actually sitting in front of you, that you're actually sitting in a room, that you're actually there at all, that you're not
See,
plugged into a matrix?
it
How certain?
always gets down to this.
as certain as one could be.
Exactly. And so it's only based upon your personal epistemology, James. It has nothing to do with the nature of reality. And you imposing your will onto God has nothing to do with whether or not God exists or is required to impose his will to yours. Because your reality is
Don't you get
generally,
it, James?
micromanaging
You want
decision
us to
in
know
order
we
to mitigate
exist?
something.
Jesus?
You
The issue
can't
of
know
course,
anything.
Amy, but not
Therefore,
to
our
the
God is
detriment
real.
of the faithful,
Doesn't it
And
make sense now?
or the increase of
I don't believe that in absolute knowledge or absolute, I don't even believe in objective morality. But all we have is what we think we know.
believe that if they
Yeah.
saw God, they would
Well,
love him.
I believe in
Why
something
lie
weird.
about
I
that in the
believe in
text? There's no
something
reason
I
to.
call
But they believe that there's some sort of idea all passed throughout the culture since the fall of man, that
biology-based
the interaction
morality.
with God by his righteous
Biological
nature
morality. There we
require
go.
you to actually be judged.
Yeah, I guess from a biological standpoint, but I wouldn't
That it was
from a
basically the justified
objective standpoint. I don't
Yeah,
know.
To me, it's just kind of weird. It's like a middle ground.
It's weird that God likes sacrifices. He seems to like animal sacrifices and human sacrifices.
Well, let me tell
and
you,
it's
Amy, what were
just
they going to be
makes no
doing with
sense.
Well, let me ask you something. What were they going to be doing with the animals if they weren't sacrificing them?
Eating
Thank
them?
you. So still killing them, right? So what is your
Yeah, but
issue
you
about
eat
the method?
meat.
Well, this is they would too. They would too. That's what the Levites lived on what was supplied by the Jews for the sacrifices. That was their sustenance. That was their taxes. It was part of their system. And the
So
idea
what
So it
was
was a way for them to get free food.
oh, you're such a disgusting bigot. And let me tell you why right now. This is the issue.
So
This is the issue right here.
triggered.
All that God did in this instance was
So it was a way for the Levites to get free food. Hey, bring us these sheep so
and
that we can kill them and eat the
part of
meat.
the union by that's
And
all.
who knows if
That's
they
it.
even
He
did that in
chose
the
to
Moses
sacrifice
story
by
with the
part of it,
goats.
but
Well, it never happened.
for
So
that
I mean,
act of faith, and then we're
Yeah, it
having
also
a
never
community
happened.
that was reaching down to the people. It's actually beautiful, and you try to pervert
it's
it
beautiful, Amy.
present as
It
bigotry.
is pretty
It really
disgusting.
is
I would
Yeah.
say human
gross.
sacrifice,
It is
animal
gross. You're
sacrifice.
very
Not
low thinking.
only is
You're
it
very low thinking.
kind of, I don't want to say, because I don't want to insult, I'm not going to insult you. The thing is kind of
Are you
delusional
vegan?
that you could, no, I'm the closest you can get to an animal rights activist while being an omnivore.
Okay, so what is the issue with killing animals
Well,
to
I
eat?
think what she's
What about
saying, Smokey,
killing
is
them?
she's challenging the theology
So ridiculous.
of how killing animals allows God to do something he couldn't do otherwise. How
It
do you
was
make that connection?
again Hebrews
Why a
11.
sacrifice?
Everyone
Why
is
is it a
justified by
sacrifice?
faith. All these acts were acts of faith. And it was instituting methods and systems that were already familiar to their culture. You don't come down the people and say something stupid like you got to climb to the top of Mount Hebron every 15 days and sacrifice a third of your children or something crazy like that.
Who would
It's
ever ask to sacrifice your
it's
children?
taking
That'd be
things
crazy.
they were doing. It's taking things they were already doing and then actually working into them. And by the way, Abraham was a very specific instance. Who, by the way, the only reason that would have been cruel, Amy, is if there was no promise for Isaac to actually be the son of the promise. See, Abraham had faith.
They
that,
make
again,
so many
Isaac was
excuses
the
for him.
promise. He wasn't
It's an
expecting to
abusive
have Isaac
relationship. It really
at his
is.
age. He wasn't expecting to be able to have Isaac now.
So Abraham had faith that he was going to do what God said, but he knew God wouldn't make him go through with it. Then that's not really an act of
Yeah,
faith, is
isn't
it?
that a
Going to be the
loophole?
son of promise.
Yeah, he knew God had made the promise about Isaac, so
I
he knew
say,
God wouldn't go through with it, but he was still going to go through and slit his son's throat
I
if he thought that's what God wanted.
up to a very similar hill. And when it came down to it, he didn't hold back. And not like he did with Abraham and Isaac. And he actually sacrificed his son for your filthy, rancid, disgusting life choices.
All right.
I know it's pretty horrible and evil, wasn't it? That he would go down and murder a random person for no reason, for rules that he gave, for
So you do,
creatures that
so
he
Amy, you do
created.
realize that your counterpoint here literally ignores the fundamental reason that Smokey was just outlining.
Yes,
You're
he was
literally
trying
saying,
to
like,
make
I'm going to throw all
horrible, horrible.
no. You're saying I'm going to throw out the
Everything he just
foundational
said.
reason for why Christ was sent.
Yes, that's the whole
None of
point.
that,
Have
none
you
of
been
that logic
listening? That's the
applies.
whole
We're
point.
going to suspend all of that from your worldview. None of that applies. There is no reason
evil,
for it.
yes.
There is no substance
No,
behind it.
Literally no reason.
Let's just toss it out the window and say, hey, God does not exist. Christianity is false because I'm going to
Yes.
completely ignore what the foundational premise is.
He's getting it. Yes. Human sacrifice
Cool.
is evil.
So your
Animal
world-
sacrifice is evil.
So what it boils
Abusive
down to
relationship, and they're gaslighting. It's abusive relationship.
So basically,
Not a guy you wanna date.
you just, again, as I said in my opening statement, again, I'm a prophet, apparently. You are now sitting on the 50-yard line, screaming about how you deny the rules. There is nothing outside of the force field, and nothing could have ever happened to make all of this happen. It's just completely random.
All right, I'm gonna jump in really
They're
fast here.
You have to be exists for the rules. That's the point you're trying to prove. We don't think there are rules that he made. We
Amy,
just
I'm
think
gonna
it's
let you
physics.
respond. I'm sorry, just let me get in here for 1 second. If
Sure,
it's good
I
with
don't mind my passion.
no, I understand. If everyone's okay with it, after Amy gets to respond, we can go over to the questions. Is that okay with everyone?
Aren't we doing
Okay.
closing statements?
Yeah, can we have a few minutes for closing statements? I mean, it's fine if they even have some too. I mean, we just
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. We can do
Having
that.
fun.
Amy, you know what? If you want to go ahead and respond and wrap up with your closing statement, and then James, and then we'll go over to Maddox and Smokey,
Sure.
and then we'll get to the question.
Sure. I don't think anyone. I don't think either team convinced each other, but I had a fun debate, and in the end, I do not. It's not that I don't want to, because if this being existed, I would want to know. But it's just I. Not only do I not see good evidence for a deity, and specifically the Christian deity, see many, many reasons to why they don't exist. Thank you. It was fun.
You want to do a closing statement?
Oh,
Amy?
and you can find more of my stuff at my channel down below, and get some comedy and skepticism.
Thank you. Thank you so much. James, if you want to go ahead with your closing statement.
Well, again, I know I enjoyed the discussion today. I'd like to thank these two distinguished representatives, very distinguished, for
Very distinguished.
indulging our questions. I don't think anybody's mind was changed. Like I said, there's so many things to talk about. It's hard to cram that much soy into one debate, but we certainly tried to pack in it as much as we could. Um, but I'm definitely open to continuing to outline the claims why Christianity is not a reasonable position. It is the antithesis of reason. It is the suspension of reason. It's a suspension of logic. It's not plausible, and it's not probable either. Um, and we didn't really hear any good evidence for that today. So
All right.
You got him to smile, though.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, really disappointing in terms of even what was presented. And in fact, I am going to probably take James's little slideshow opening and have a fun time just picking that apart in asinine hilarity that it is with Dr. Kenny Rhodes at some point on my channel. And I guess I'll kind of
go ahead.
summarize.
I'll come in and do it with you.
Okay. Okay, that's a good idea, James. I like that. So focusing on that too is the idea that what James tried to do was smuggle in a bunch of assumptions, some scholarly, some his own, into historical acknowledgement, and this is commonly done with a misunderstanding of what the evidence.
Just want to say that is like my biggest pet peeve. What he's about to explain that he's saying atheists do is probably my biggest pet peeve of creationists, is that they take good research and then shitty research. They mix it together. They zoom in on their shitty research, or they show pieces of their shit, all the shitty research, and they don't show you the sources. And then they go to the good research and they zoom in on just like the abstract, where it doesn't say like we tested 10 paranormal claims, and it's like none of them were found true.
Well, obviously, they don't have any real evidence on their side. They don't really have any type of real things to point to. So they have to cobble together these arguments, these mixing philosophy and mixing philosophy and science and history, and a lot of it is just trying to muddy the waters, and they're hoping it goes over the heads of a lot of people and just sounds really good. But when you get into the minutia of it, when you dive really deep into it, which goes over most people's heads, but these arguments are not really very convincing. I told Smokey before, I like him as a person. I think he's a good guy, but I think he's wrong about damn near everything he says. I think I don't think his arguments are really more convincing than any other Christian. He just has a unique style of delivery that a lot of people find.
It's more convincing to him because he's solved his own problems. But to atheists, I think my expression is, you're moving deck chairs on the Titanic. Like, we don't believe Jesus resurrected, and you guys didn't bring any Jesus resurrecting to is Christianity debate.
I mean, it's like reminds me of like a like a lawyer in court with an obviously guilty client, and there's a ton of evidence against them, and all they can really do is go up there and poke hole here, hole there, make some excuses, and just try to muddy the waters and confuse the people. And
well, exactly. In fact, if you have a guilty client, is it a good line of reasoning to go, Your Honor, how do we know anything? Do we really know anything at all? How do we know knowledge is real? And so the judge would look at that and go like, he robbed her, right? And be like, yeah, he probably robbed her. Like,
Yeah, I don't know
isn't
why
that how
like these.
that goes?
I don't know why they think that argument is so good. I call that the Mr. Batman 1+1 = 2 = Jesus fallacy, because he has actually said that, because people have challenged him on that. Like you can't know anything, and they've said, you mean even like mathematics? You can't know that without God? And he says, yes, you can't know 1+1 = 2 without God being real. Um, uh, I don't know who that's convincing, but it's certainly not convincing me.
Yeah, not convincing me. Oh, but yeah, that's exact. So that's exact. It's just once again, that's exactly what he's about to do to us.
Evidence that scholarship is actually pointing to, which is that there are alterations in language.
Also, as
He's
if
going to concede that here. He's going to concede my point, which that I made, that these texts were altered, but he's going to say no, but they're good alterations. They're making it better. You know,
that makes,
they're good alterations. Don't worry about it. Just keep believing in it.
just keep believing it. Just
Keep
ignore
believing in
those.
it. God wouldn't let him put anything in there that wasn't good. So, just keep believing in it.
Just trust the sausage. That's what you're trying to say.
Trust the soy.
Throughout the text. However, there are justifications for the text having been meticulously maintained over the generations, including something James unfortunately probably isn't familiar with. This is the work of Dr. Ivan Panin in the heptadic structure of Scripture, which gives us very strong evidence that not only was the Torah meticulously given to Moses, but potentially probably letter by letter. So there's lots of evidence to support the fact of the preservation of Scripture. And the only evidence James has to appeal to is the hypothetical assumptions of hyper-liberal scholarship to attempt to assume these alterations or updates in language or terms is somehow an addition to the text. And it's just not. And that's just his desperate grasp of attempting to yield to the most liberal, ridiculous, more recent versions of scholarship.
They love their buzzwords.
To protect his bias.
Smokey, he just got done saying that the Torah was dictated maybe letter for letter, but he's always said before that he takes a very loose view of inspiration. Like, it's not.
And it's oral tradition. That's bullshit.
But yeah,
It's not.
It got
letter
written down
for letter.
eventually.
He just said the Torah could have been letter for letter by God to Moses.
In an ancient culture handed to an ancient people in terms that they would recognize, and to assume.
I believe Mel Brooks's version happened way more than the real version. Or that version. I shouldn't say the real.
The Christian God does indeed exist and is the most reasonable of all God claims. I yield.
Yeah, he literally provided no evidence for why Christianity is more reasonable than any other religion.
Well, tonight is yet another proof
in coming out out of
standard atheist position that they don't actually have to rationally look at things that don't enable them to escape any accountability to God or just anything external to themselves. And the level of desperation knows no bounds. I mean, the irony is this is now, I think, the 6th or 7th debate I've done where I have made predictions in my opening statements to which my opponents literally act like they didn't ever happen. They never existed.
It's a prophet.
It's very ironic. It continues over and over again. But I think the audience, I've come to my opponents talk about how we didn't convince them. Well, I don't think they actually have any intention of being convinced. And because the same denials continue.
Well, unfortunately, you guys don't present arguments that refute the points.
Or are convincing.
I do this for the people who...
We raise the same points because you don't refute them. They're just sidestepped.
As I said in my opening statement, begin to ponder, consider, and perhaps at some point take the time to go and research for themselves and go beyond the standard talking points that are spewed ad nauseum by the desperate atheists.
See, James,
see if it is
it's us. It's not them. It's not that they haven't looked into their beliefs. It's us.
I do after shows after a debate that I do because I'm tired, but this one decided I'm going to. So head on over to my channel.
Oh, it was a good time, Maddox. I'm glad you did.
We'll have a good time. Be open mic and love to get input from other folks. So appreciate your time. And whether, in spite of our confrontations, Amy and James, you have bigger courage than the average person. So at a minimum, I got to give you guys credit for being willing to come on and accept the challenge. Oh, and thank you, Carissa, for being an awesome mod.
Well, thank you, Maddox. And we will get over to questions now. Really excited about these questions. It looks like there's a good number. We're going to have to go through them somewhat quickly, but I think we'll definitely get through them all.
Bring them on.
You. What's that?
I said, bring them on.
All right, first one is from Nightmare. Thank you so much. Says awesome opening, Smokey and Maddox.
Thank you, Nightmare. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Love you, bro.
Next one, I'm doing these in order. It's from Maddox Minot. Thank you for the $5. He said the moderator is hot. Next one.
She's married. Back off.
True.
Chris, I don't know if you noticed this, but in chat there were many people complimenting like Chris's hair is so hot tonight. I don't know if you saw that. I was cracking up about that.
Smokey's projecting a little bit there.
Same thing to James.
I know. James and I are just off.
Definitely the people in chat.
Next one is from Barry. Thank you for $5. Say at Smokey and at Maddox, exactly how many bales of hay did it take to construct all those straw men during your opening statements?
Which, well, you see, like most atheists, it's just kind of an assertion of emotions of, oh, everything was terrible. It's all straw man. You know, you took the entire characters to summarize something that we can't even respond to, as opposed to, I don't know, put a specific example of something that you thought straw man was.
Smokey was the one crying about straw men the whole debate.
I know.
Our-
Which is once again ironic.
Experience in the
Because
Bible.
if you read the Bible and you tell me that, that's straw manning.
An all-powerful, all-good God would intervene whenever there is evil and suffering. Bottom line, Satan knows that God exists and yet he chose to rebel. So the free will argument is BS.
That's a requirement for us to accept a predeterministic paradigm into our worldview, which I already addressed with James multiple times, is not something we believe. You need to be able to prove predeterministic inside the narrative. Otherwise, we don't have to hold to that. Otherwise, God is open to allowing a reality to emerge of free will choices and then respecting them from his moral agency. It's not just him being all powerful and being all good. He's also
Missing the point of the question here.
which means he has to actually operate within the confines of his righteous nature, just as he does his goodness. Those things sometimes compete, just like being just and being merciful sometimes compete. But he is the highest.
It's called a contradiction, not a competition.
Require these absolutist ideals in your challenge, which don't actually fit to the claim. You're the one straw manning this one, unfortunately.
No,
I wanted to make a response, unless you wanted to go, Matt.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to say, I think it's funny that when we see the dichotomy in the Bible, we see in the ancient past, God had no problem actively intervening and actively doing things to affect reality. As we've moved forward, where we could expect evidence of that, he just decided to invent the doctrine of divine hiddenness, and now he pretends like he's not there. He was active in the past, but all of a sudden now he doesn't want to do anything anymore.
You ignored my response, James. You ignored my response.
No. Well,
you did. It was answered in Hebrews 11. There was people were operating, or there were some people that were operating by.
It's not a convincing answer, Smokey.
Buffer for God to actually violate the divine hiddenness ordinance because they were living by faith. But this is also why those people had an extremely high level of accountability. It's not the type of thing that's generally a good environment for everyone, because you're accountable for what you do almost in an instantaneous basis in a theocratic system. So the Jews were inside this system. There was a different measure, a different construct. You're trying to equate. It's a false equivocation.
Gotcha.
Saying how it looks, but thank you.
Next
Well,
one,
let me
energy.
say a little something about that here, right there, Smokey. Now, what I meant is that the claim was made about free will and whatnot, and so we're always told that God hides himself, because for him to make his existence manifestly known, for that to be apparent, that would violate free will. It'd be forcing you, Amy, to believe that he exists. He doesn't want to force you to do that, Amy. So he drops you these little tidbits, but he hides. He doesn't come right out in the open. And that doesn't make sense, because in the past, when he did all these things, when he did interact with the world, when he
Yeah.
did suspend the laws of physics, when he did all these things, his people, the Jews in the desert, after crossing the Red Sea, after God parted the sea so that they could escape Pharaoh's army and then drown the Pharaoh's army. And then Moses goes up to this mountain, and he's up there for a little bit too long. So what's the first thing they decide to do? They know for a fact this God's real. 100% fact, no doubt about it. This God is real. They still decided to make idols and worship other gods. I guess the story would go, hey, they knew at some point God's going to kill us for this, but hey, we've got
Have
to
a
do
good
this
time
just
anyway.
because. Yeah, we've got to do this just because it's what the text says. But in reality, people are not really that stupid. you know Christians today don't do that. They've never seen any manifest evidence. They've never seen any proof that God exists. They've never seen the laws of physics suspended. They've never seen anything like that happen. uh, Yet they remain faithful to their faith. You're saying these people in the past, they did see all that, and then they were still wishy-washy. They, hey, maybe we'll worship God, maybe we'll worship another God tomorrow, maybe whatever. These are
See what deal
stories.
we get.
These are not. It only makes sense in the world that they were in, which was a
I
polytheistic
call them
world.
plot devices. It's the only reason why God really exists. That he
It,
exists for us.
he needs to. It's to put struggle and to put intrigue into the plot. To so you're reading like, oh, how could these people
Well, it's
be
why
that
he hardened
stupid?
Pharaoh's heart. The only reason he hardened Pharaoh's heart is because the story writer was like, shit, I need an act 3. Like, he can't give in now. Like, we're like at the end of the story. He can't just be like, all right, guys, gone. So he's like, and then he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
And he
Done.
did this and he
And
did
now we can
that.
go, now we can get us to the third act.
But the concept of what it went over his head is because it's the challenge that God can't make himself manifestly known, or he's violating free will. Well, that's not true,
Yeah.
because the Jews they still had the free will, and they frequently chose to worship other gods. They knew for a
What about
fact God
Satan?
existed.
Satan has free will and all this other stuff, supposedly. So,
Now, and that's another thing I brought up. I was bringing that up today with Brett Keane in the comment section of his channel, because he takes the position that God's real. He's just a dick. He's an evil God, or he likes to do bad things to people just to amuse himself, which is certainly a take on it. But you know, um, the idea that God would create these highly intelligent beings, and that in heaven they would just decide one day to mount an insurrection against an omnipotent God, that it would have no chance of success, no possibility you could ever do anything to hurt this God. And they just said, not only did this happen once, but the devil was apparently able to convince 30 some percent of the angels to join this suicidal, stupid, pointless insurrection that was doomed to fail from the start. It doesn't make any sense.
yep, only from a plot device.
It makes no sense. And and then it gets even worse from that, because moving on from that, um, they would know that, okay, God's gonna punish him. He's gonna send him to hell in the end, but he's gonna give him a time to do all this shit before now and then. You know, why would they go along with all this, knowing what's going to happen in the end, just to amuse God? If that were me, I would just wave my middle finger up to God and say, yeah, that's nice. I'm not going to do your theatrics. If you're going to throw me to hell, throw me to hell. But I'm not going to do all this crazy shit before to amuse you, so you can destroy me in front of the world for the world to see, unless God made him do it that way, in which case there's no free will anyway, because he's just making people do things. But I don't know.
Yeah, especially if there's a plan. That also is contradictory. If God has a plan, which I don't know where they get that anything from, but if he's got a plan, then it's deterministic.
Yeah, Smokey, he likes to throw that out there. It's determinism, and that's not really my argument at all. I was not a Calvinist as a Christian. I was not hyper predestinarian, but at some level, God does know what's going to happen, so you can't really get around that um, very neatly. Although he definitely tries to wiggle out of that, and not give God any culpability for uh, things that he knows is going to happen, not give him any blame
It's
whatsoever.
really weird. They want it on one level. They want to have like what they call free will, which is like this ultimate thing to them. But on another level, it really just seems like control. Like it's just a guy who is just he'll take care of everything as long as I do everything that he says and that I worship him. It's like a weird
So,
dichotomy.
well, like I said
Freedom
before,
and what a
Amy,
lack of freedom.
because what's the meaning of life, Amy? What's the purpose of life?
Eating.
Well, no. If you were a Christian, what would be the purpose of life?
To worship God.
Yeah, to die and go to heaven, so you can sit there and you can praise Him forever.
Oh, exactly.
That's the meaning of
Endlessly and
life.
endlessly. That's right.
That's why
Worship
you're
my
created,
leader.
Amy.
I forgot.
That's why He made you, because
Your
He
leader.
was bored and He wanted to make a bunch of inferior beings so that they could tell Him how great He is all day, every day, forever.
Ex-
That's the that's the purpose of life, Amy.
That's how he gets off.
Uh, and if and that's why I said maybe I said I don't know why these angels would engage in this stupid suicidal rebellion. I mean, maybe 400 quintillion years of just sitting there telling God how great He is all day. Maybe after a while they start to say, "This really sucks. I would rather be in hell than doing this shit forever."
And then they rebel.
And God is just listening and God, you're so great. God, I love you. You're a really good God. You're an amazing God, best God ever. And God is just sitting there nodding in agreement with everything they're saying, and he just can't get enough of it. Yep, keep on coming, keep on praising me. Yep, yep, yep. Otherwise, I'm gonna kill you. I'll do really bad things to you. So you better love me, right?
Or else.
Or else, yeah, yeah. Best God ever.
Cytosine in the DNA code. It's prone to deamination and has to be repaired, but repair isn't 100%, so it's a major contributor to mutation rates. An engineer would replace cytosine.
Oh, that's a Maddox question for
You
sure.
know, stupid whore energy. I'm pretty sure you're copying somebody else's question or you've asked me that question before, and apparently weren't paying attention to the counterpoint that I made the last time. So what I did recently, you should go Google about this in Nature of how, from an epigenetic perspective, I think it's like the fifth position of the cytosine has dramatic importance in relation to methylation and different epigenetic factors, which are directly relevant in a whole plethora of functions, and the ability for it to be modified is what enables so many different facets of life to add functions of life.
Hope I had my sound off a minute ago.
And there's specific
It's okay.
repair
Did
mechanisms
did I have it on? Oh shit!
that issue while also
I've been fighting a cold these past 2 days.
No,
Go
I'm
check
sorry.
No, it's all right. I just don't want
Next one is from
that to come up on the video.
This is addressed to Amy. Maddox and Smokey have no good evidence for Christianity, and apparently that's your problem. LOL.
Was that a question or a statement?
A statement just
okay.
toward you.
Yep.
Next one is from also Stupid Horror Energy. Who say, "What makes you so sure that Rhiannon?" I'm not sure what they meant here. I think reanalyzing the problem won't be solved.
Sorry, I did not understand that.
I'm not 100% sure.
I think she's trying to say there's problems like with the biogenesis, but why do you think that we won't find an answer? You know, the more experimentation we do and the more we understand about it. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that one's pretty straightforward. I mean, the more experiments we do, the more complexity and the more barriers to entry that we find. I mean, we're not getting closer, we're getting further away. Like, we're understanding more and more of what is required, but not accounting for how it could be pulled off. I mean, it's a major problem. I mean, people just need to go and read books on this. I mean, from 2020, and this is freely admitted by many atheist abiogenesis researchers.
All right. Next one is from Rodent.
Yep, we don't know exactly how it happened.
No
Not
last
sure
name.
yet.
Thank you for being the dumpster fire that warms my heart. Next one is from Barry Berry. Smokey, if God stops a killer, then you say it's a violation of free will. But if I stop a killer, then it's not a violation of free will. The fuck?
What? They're both violations of free will. It's just the acting agency is different, and you don't know. This is the problem with atheist perspective. It's all based upon their own finite scope. So again, it's the guy's always asking, why is there so much evil? Never asking why there isn't more. The hand of God could be in so many instances where you wouldn't notice because you only notice things when they go wrong. It's like you'll hear about the story of the man.
Why are you asking why I beat you when... Sorry, that's my cat. Why are you asking why I beat you when you could be asking yourself, why don't I beat you more?
Mass shooter shot up a theater with 30 people. You won't hear about.
Well, you know, I mean, when a plane crashes, why don't we just sit there and say, who cares why it crashed? Why didn't more planes crash?
On why
Yeah.
it's so horrible.
Look at that one. It didn't crash, so it's okay.
Why it's not worse. And maybe that has to do with the fact that there is a good God that is ultimately looking over some of these things and not allowing it to get to a certain level of bad.
Gotcha. All right. Next one is from Mike Billers at Maddox. When your child talks to you, do you respond? Can your child see you and interact with you?
I'm not going to respond to a juvenile question like that. Obviously, that's the case.
All right. Next one is from Angel Gray. We say God creates man, sets him up to fail, and then condemns man forever. This is about it. What loving God would do this.
That's an assertion, again, predestinarian approach. That's not what we believe. You're requiring God to actually make a prejudgment is what you're doing. You're requiring God to violate his actual righteous state. This unfortunately would have to be a longer answer. But if you judge someone before they actually do it, you're being unrighteous, and God is righteous. So he is, by his nature, taking a morally passive as opposed to a morally proactive stance to respect his nature and also respect the nature of reality, which is an environment for the expression of free love, which requires the expression of free will choice. You're just, again, requiring an alteration to the nature of reality, which is inconsistent with the claim itself.
Yeah, but humans don't
Just
prejudge things because we don't know what's going to happen.
people for the sins that their parents committed.
Passive,
So I don't see.
that's no, you're trying to shoehorn in again that literalism, James. And you know what? That's a
does
really
it.
bad.
But
You don't
he's
get to
almost
make a
a
whole new
literalist
point
in a
the question and
majority
answer
of
period,
things
dude,
that we've
especially
talked
another
about.
straw man. So why don't you just
The
sit
Bible,
You wanna
the
come back?
Torah,
and ask
the
it all
Torah says that you can't bring a bastard into the
I'll-
temple, into the tabernacle.
I know.
A child who is born outside of wedlock has no control over what his parents did, so you are castigating that child for what his parents did.
Said, my
Yeah.
parents are Jewish. Does that imply that you are not Jewish? Are you invoking the ideology and not ethnicity? And what does that prove?
I don't call myself a cultural Jew. I'll celebrate Hanukkah with my parents when they do it to go over, but I don't celebrate it myself personally. And yeah.
Well, are your parents?
What was the end of the question again?
It was. I thought it was kind of asking if you were just ethnically Jewish or just like religiously Jewish, or your parents were.
I mean, it's complicated. You know, my whole family's Ashkenazi, but you know, and so I could sometimes say maybe my ethnicity is Ashkenazi, and you could say maybe I'm an Ashkenazi atheist. But you know, it's complicated. Because on one hand, I'm I'm trying to get rid of Judaism. On the other hand, I really hate the Nazis and all the people who hate Jews. And so I'm stuck in like this weird middle
Could have fooled
thing.
me.
Oh, will you stop it? It's the book I hate. I mean, I'm fine with
Like
Israel
you hate your
existing, and I'm
ancestors too.
my ancestor. It's their religion. Like I like bacon, and there's not gonna be a book that's like, yeah, no, bacon's really bad. Tell me, the guy up there told me. Trust
You
me.
know, it is
Like,
actually generally considered to be unhealthy food, right?
Actually, no. Pigs are actually healthy or clean creatures. They don't go. They only
Yeah,
go in
but
mud.
no,
They
no,
don't
no.
go in shit.
No,
or
but
other-
the actual caloric and fat content of pig meat. is
There
generally
was a time where before like fire, where you could say that you could.
There's
get
plenty of other foods that are way more unhealthy that God
in
doesn't
a
ban.
general
So
sense,
it's
modern
Yeah, I
nutritional
mean,
standards,
bacon's
pork
not
is
healthy,
a good meat
but
to rely upon. Would you agree or no?
to ban it
Um,
is kind of
well, now
silly.
you're trying
there's plenty of
to-
food that is
My wife-
worse that it doesn't ban.
It's literally.
I mean, we'd have to ban
if you
soda.
were to
We'd have to
say,
ban
okay,
so
I don't know.
much.
not
Maybe
good
God just
anymore,
wanted them to like be like,
edit
hey,
it.
by the way, this food's not good for you, but whatever. Okay.
Well, Smokey, let's move on from this one because as Amy just showcased, she likes the way things make her feel, not whether or not there's any
No, if it was true, I'd want to
substantive
know it.
reason to do or not to do something behind
Straw
it
man.
because she loves the way it tastes.
All right,
And
I'm gonna let
extrapolate
you-
that out to anywhere else.
Wait. Once again, because these are two Christians who eat bacon, so they yeeted the Jewish rules, and they're like, yeah, it's not in the 10. The 10's like my throw pillow. That's what I like, not the 600. I'm not gonna follow the 600.
Oh, look at Maddox there. He is.
I know.
It's just a guy. It's just a bunch of guys who wrote stuff down. and then
So he's like, no, Amy. We have a very complicated theology for why we follow certain laws and not the others. It makes sense.
All right. Next one, thank you so much. The next one is from James Labrado. He says, James, all religions are wrong is an unsubstantiated claim. Science's discovery of natural phenomena does nothing to disprove a God. Read William James, The Variety of Religious Experience, by the way.
Okay, so it's very difficult to prove beyond a doubt that something doesn't exist, but we generally don't believe something exists unless we have evidence that it actually exists. What we're saying is there's no justifiable reason to believe in a God, not that it's objectively impossible for there to be one.
Why do you?
I can't prove that, but
James, can I ask you?
Go ahead.
Why does your standard get to be the standard everyone else is supposed to accept?
Well, it's not. Everyone decides for themselves.
Awesome. Thank you.
I am making the case.
So your
that it is
statement just
my
doesn't matter.
I am making the
Isn't
case
that-
that it's my opinion.
It matters the same as your standards.
I was gonna
Smokey. You're
say-
allowed to pontificate your standard. I'm allowed to put out mine. You have a very. You'll accept anything as evidence for God. I want to accept actually things that I think make sense.
Yeah, they're the ones that are trying to push their standard.
He said, "Oh, if you find two old writings that say something, you basically know that that's fact. Basically,
Question was
I take a little bit of a different view on that.
If there was real good evidence, I would convert back to Christianity today. I just haven't seen any. I didn't become an atheist because I didn't like Christianity or because of any other reason other than I became convinced that it wasn't true objectively. And why follow something?
You
if
can't
it's
say
not true?
that. You can only say subjectively. I'm sorry, but that's a lie.
It's my opinion that it's
Yes.
objectively untrue.
So it's subjective. It's your subjective opinion that it's objectively.
That's a word salad, but I guess so.
Not
Go
not,
ahead.
not to quote G-Man too much, but subjective, objective opinion.
All right, next one is from Shaw Thomas. You say the only place you can find proof for God is through this video. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 proof of God.
What? Okay. What? I don't know what that's about.
Guess we're done now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Next one is from KO Champ FTT. It says 1 Samuel 15, 3, God orders the deaths of every man, woman, child, and fictional people who can't be proven to exist. God wills it, I guess.
Well, I guess if they're fictional, then you don't have to worry about making a challenge of the claim, do you?
All right. I know there's a few more. I was thinking that it's going to be a little longer. I refreshed it. So give me 1 second.
No problem.
All right, next question is from Stupid Horror Energy. C to T mutations break alpha helix's gene.
Oh, here goes Maddox. The wheels are grinding.
Lord, I think you've asked me this one before too. I think as a follow up to the last time, and it's also known that alpha helices are more robust to mutations than beta strands. So it seems that engineer that you're claiming doesn't do anything to account for optimization and variability actually accounted for that, and that the structures that you're saying disprove that are actually more robust in relation in anticipation of what you're referring to. So why don't you go look up on that, genius?
All right.
All right, so Amy, let's just go ahead and shut down all the biology departments at all the major universities. They can all go home. No more work to do. Nothing to see here, and let's just find this old book from the Bronze Age, and we'll just go with that.
See, you joke, but there are some days where I
James
think
is a
that's their
patriarch.
wish.
I can't have hard feelings. He gives me money every month.
You do a lot of work for our
Friend of
cause,
me.
Smokey.
Yeah, I figured you'd say something like that.
So, Smokey, are you ready today to give your life over to reason and accept reality? Are you willing to accept reality on its own terms and make the truth the Lord
You
of your
know,
life?
James, you haven't presented anything that leads me to believe that you are operating in anything close to what I would consider reality. So if it's reality based upon how you're judging it and justifying it, I think I'll pass.
All right, and with that, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and thank you to all of our speakers tonight for taking times out of your busy schedules. Don't forget to check them out in the description box below, and keep separating the reasonable from the unreasonable. Have an incredible rest of your night.
All right.
Well, that was a interesting going through all that, Amy. I thank you for taking the time to do that with me. I haven't gone through the debate yet since we had it,
Yeah, neither have I. That was a lot of fun.
but yeah, it was a good time. I mean, maybe a little bit of a dumpster fire, but I think it definitely could have been worse. Like Smokey said, I mean, it could always be worse, no matter how bad it gets, right?
Exactly.
Why
I
didn't
don't-
God just make it worse? Be thankful He didn't.
Yeah, and also, as normal, didn't come down. Didn't come and join us in the debate. Always has an open invitation, but they never seem to join in any of these debates. Never seem to make any appearances. Just seem to kind of still be playing hide and seek world champion.
And I mean, I know you're sincere in your beliefs. I think I am. And if I saw good evidence out there, I would want to know about it. I wouldn't deny it. I would want to, if this God really exists and he really is there and he loves me and he has a plan for me and he wants good things for me, I would probably want to know what's going on with this, and I would want to uh, learn about him and do what he says. But I'm just not seeing any rational evidence of that. I'm just seeing excuses and rationalizations, and if that's enough for you, if you're okay with that and you're just going to be happy, okay. But I need a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I'm gonna need, especially for how high the stakes they say, I'm going to need a decent amount of evidence. I mean, you would expect the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful creator of the universe would be able to muscle up something a little bit better than what
An old
seems
book.
to be. Yeah. Some formats that we know are highly malleable and valuable. But yeah, I think it was a good debate, and I
It was a
think
good example of talking to them and seeing what these nuanced Christians, these modern Christians, how they rationalize their religion and how they deal with the fictions and with the evidence that is coming around it from all sides. And I do feel for them because they have this worldview to defend that is being from every side constantly. Reality is closing in on them, and that's
yeah.
they've made the decision to defend it. So it's
Well, let me tell you, they feel like we're getting closing in on them when they're the majority. So,
well, reality is closing in on them. But yeah,
indeed. But all right, I'm gonna stop the feed for everyone that was watching.
stop the feed.
Thank
Have a good
you
night.
for joining
Thank you for
us,
watching. If you made it this far.
and good night.
Oh.